Call the regular meeting of the Eugene School Board to order on Wednesday, May 17th, 2023 at 7:03 p.m. Board members in attendance are Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, Gordon Lafer, and myself, Myra Vasa. Please join Superintendent Dye as he leads us in the flag salute.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Superintendent Dye. Now I will read the land acknowledgement. Eugene School Board would like to acknowledge that our institution sits on the homelands of the Kalapuya people. In the treaties of 1851 and 1854 to 1855, and subsequent forced removals of many Indian people from Western Oregon, some of the Kalapuya were moved to the Grand Ronde Reservation, and some were moved to the Siletz Reservation. It is important to note that all of Lane County was an important trading and gathering area for camps and other resources, and continues to be. During the Restoration era from 1977 to 1989, Lane County was designated as the service area for the Confederated Tribes of Coos, Lower Umpqua, and Sayuswa Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Indians, the Confederated Tribes of Siletz Indians, the Coquille Indian Tribe, and the Cow Creek Band of Umpqua Indians. Eugene School District 4J acknowledges that the descendants of original and service area inhabitants of this land are still here today. They are thriving members of our schools and our communities. Countless members of other tribes now also call our community and schools their home. We wish to thank those original stewards of this land. We as fellow stewards of this land wish to remember that we need to take good care of this land and take good care of all the members of our school district community. First up on our meeting agenda is to receive reports from high school student representatives. I have somebody that would like to go first. Okay, great, go for it.
Okay, I've been on the panel a while because myself and most of the other students at Eugene have been really busy with AP and IB exams. There are still a few IB exams to go, but mostly out of the woods. So most of the academic pressure has been waning. However, there's been a lot of other high pressure events recently with all the bomb threats, which as you likely expected will be what I use the rest of my time to talk about. In the past 3 weeks, South Eugene has had 3 bomb threats, the first 2 on Wednesdays and the most recent one was yesterday. On the second Wednesday, there was also a threat of dangerous persons in the school. That made us go into lockdown and then we evacuated the building. Overall, students did very well during evacuations, living in county schools and staying with their assigned teachers. However, there is a growing concern in the student body of how this will continue. Many people are nervous that after receiving more calls from future students, teachers, and administration may not treat these threats as serious. While in truth, we understand that our district takes this situation very, very seriously. It would be nice to have confirmation that these threats will be treated the same no matter if they are the 3rd or the 20th of their kind. These students want our administration to be transparent with these matters that concern our safety, to ensure that we are not being left in the dark, disregarding whatever number of false alarms there may be. We know these threats present difficulties for everyone on every level of the district, along with schools and other districts in other states, and we appreciate the steps that you take.
Thank you. Apathy?
Hi everyone, my name is Butterfly and I am the student representative of Churchill High School. At Churchill High School this week and next week we're having musical, and also fall sports are coming up soon. Our ASC leadership are planning to have a senior assembly on June 2nd and senior sunset on June 8th. Our Infinity groups are having a graduation celebration for their seniors during lunch on June 2nd. Our seniors are also getting prepared for graduation, and our ASB leadership are planning to have a senior week for next week. Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, Hi, I'm Grant Gamble, and I'm the student representative for Sheldon. To start off the report, we had our prom last weekend, which went very well. Students were able to have fun and celebrate with their peers at the closing of the year as we begin to finish our AP and IB exam season in the school year as a whole. Next week, we are hosting Spring Fest, which is a 4-day festival during lunch with activities from student-run clubs and affinity groups every day. The festival also will lead up to our Spring Carnival, which is next Friday. For some smaller announcements, there's a field trip to watch Shakespeare's 12th Night tomorrow, and we also had a very successful student-led teacher appreciation week with different clubs creating gifts for the teachers. And finally, we had a job fair in the courtyard that went very well today. And to address student concerns, there has been a growing concern regarding the schedule change set to take place next year. Students are failing to understand how this schedule change is beneficial to them. Students are also talking about how the new schedule seems unorganized and rushed. One of the main concerns is regarding the proposed extended lunch day, which will lead to clubs and affinity groups meeting only one day of the week on this extended day. Having only one day for groups to meet will restrict how much students are able to participate fully within their school's community, especially if they have various interests and intersecting identities. As an example, if a student wants to be a part of both BSU and GSA, they're now forced to choose between two parts of their identity instead of being able to participate fully in the school's community for both. Some students have also been discussing how having yet another change to school will be doing more harm than good. Students have gone from distance learning to hybrid learning to in-person learning and have yet another new schedule to adjust to. The new schedule will cause students to feel anxious and unadjusted at school yet again. Thank you.
Thank you, Grant.
Hi, I'm the program and I'm representative for North Eugene High School. The North Eugene Theater just finished their run of Addams Family last week, and that went very well. And currently, for the past while, there's been stress, of course, about the IB exams and everyone who's been taking those. But everyone's just well, class has been going well, regardless of the testing in the building and rooms, some rooms being closed, and that all finishes within this next week. The North Eugene GSA, along with South Sheldon and Churchill, on May 26th is hosting a tea party from 4:30 to 7. I don't have the location for that, but I know it's available on their social medias. And the first Friday in June, they're planning their second annual Pride Festival at North Eugene High School. We've had Spirit Week this week that ASB put on. Today was Everyone Wears Pink Day. Tomorrow is our Gone Fishing Day, and Friday there's a beach day. As well as the North Eugene students are still worried about the schedule change, and there's still some anxiety regarding that, just in the fact that it is a new schedule and a new building, and there's just a lot of newness that raises a little bit of anxiety. But I know largely there is some thankfulness about the change from what that first proposed schedule was to the new one of the AB day, and then Wednesday kind of having more stuff that, and then back to the AB schedule versus how it originally was, and that is like recognized as being something that is like helpful to have this start versus what it was before.
Thank you, Parker. Then if you wanna turn on your mic and share with us, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi, I'm Ren Washington. I'm the student representative for Eugene Online Academy. As we get closer to being done with the school year, I want to talk about things I and other students would like to see happen in the future for EOA. First, we would like to see more acknowledgement. EOA is a program that functions as a school, and as students, we like to see the same opportunities as in-person students for acknowledgement of our successes and our struggles. The first EOA representative, I want to see future representatives have the same amount of acknowledgement as the other student representatives. For Next year, online students also need more opportunities to get together in person and connect with their peers rather than from a breakout room. As mentioned before, peer interactions and relationships are important and provide critical social emotional skills such as cooperation, empathy, patience, and problem-solving strategies. Being able to connect with others also offers students reduced stress, mental health support, better self-esteem, and confidence. Another issue I want to bring up that affects online students is how a trimester will end and a new one will start just to be cut off by break. Last winter break, the trimester started and ran for 2 weeks before the break started, which makes it hard for students to settle into the new routine. This can be something that the board could put their focus on and come up with solutions that will make the trimester and breaks easier for EOA students in the future. This may be resolved with a switch to semesters next year, but when making district decisions, the effects on online students should also be considered.
Thank you, Lynn. Thank you all, student reps. Next, we move on to an agenda review. Are there any questions, changes, or corrections to the agenda anyone would like to request? I have a few. Go ahead and throw them out. Do you want me to go ahead and start?
No, if you've got it.
We need to add an item for action regarding the complaints we just discussed in our work session, as well as one of the complaints from our last work session. If there's no objection, if you do object to adding that, please speak up so I can make sure to not miss you. Okay, so we will go ahead and add that as an item for action. We also need to add an item for action. And the reason we need to add this as an item for action is that it is time sensitive and it requires us to make a decision tonight. This came to the district within the last few days, but we have the opportunity to re-spark our relationship with the city of Eugene regarding the issuance of 1 passes for the summer. And I'd like to have us add as an item for action a decision as to whether or not we want to participate in that program as we've been invited to do. If there's no objection, if you do object, please speak up and we can take it to a vote. There is no, I see and hear no objections, so we will add that as an item for action. The last thing is to move the board self-evaluation from an item for future action to an item for action so that we can make a decision regarding the method by which we'll conduct that self-evaluation so that we can direct staff to begin that work with us. So if anybody objects to making that shift on the schedule of the agenda, please speak up. Judy.
Do we have a timeline on that? Did you want to do that sooner rather than later, which is why we're going to action?
It's just going to action to decide how we're gonna do the evaluation, but considering we only have 2 more meetings, and we are required to do self-evaluation, weren't able to do one last year, I don't wanna miss another year, so in terms of getting it rolling.
I don't have an objection.
Yeah, it was, I think it was supposed to be, and it just was an oversight, so just moving it up. So if there's no objection, then we'll go ahead and move that from an item for future action to an item for action. Are there any other amendments somebody would like to make to the agenda? Okay, and other than those 3 items, our agenda stands. Next up is the introduction of guests and our superintendent's report. Superintendent Dye, you have the floor.
Thank you, and good evening, everyone here in the audience, thanks for coming, and the listening audience, thanks for tuning in. Tonight we find ourselves once again on the heels of disrupted learning at South Eugene High School. As yesterday, the school experienced their 3rd swatting call in as many weeks. I cannot overstate the impact incidents such as these have on our students, our staff, our families, and our community at large. In addition to the loss of learning and teaching time and the resulting emotional toll these events have on our school communities, students in particular, teachers in particular, there are very real resource costs associated with responding to such events. I wish to express again our tremendous gratitude for our partners at the Eugene Police Department, the Central Lane 911 Dispatch Center, and the local Federal Bureau of Investigation's office. Their swift, decisive response and the thoroughness of their ongoing investigation has provided great relief to many in the South Eugene community. It has been shared that their investigation is proving fruitful as they are narrowing in on likely sources locally who have connected with national individuals who initiate the threatening calls. To support this work, the Eugene Police Department and the Eugene School District 4J are working together to connect with Crime Stoppers to offer a reward for identification of the individuals responsible for the criminal activity. Additionally, it is not lost that these incidents have occurred during the month of May, recognized as Mental Health Awareness Month. Here in 4J, we are fortunate for the dedicated staffing and expertise on the prevention and wellness team. Having trained individuals embedded within our system and able to immediately respond to these circumstances has proven incredibly beneficial to our students. Care and advocacy team members are swiftly dispatched as needs are identified, and trained experts work with our students to process each incident. Beyond the work of incident response, these experts are busy building systems of support across our district to ensure that students have access to the resources that they need. Recently, the Prevention and Wellness team held a poster design contest, and Churchill High School student Jamie Flores Cruz was the winning designer. Jamie's poster beautifully showcases the importance of mental health and encourages individuals to seek help when they need it. Finally, it is with pride I share that Jill Chikorik at Roosevelt Middle School, Avery, and I apologize if I mispronounced your last name, Volkovac at Sheldon High School, and the Sources Peer Leader Team at Spencer Butte Middle School have been selected as 2023 Oregon Sources of Strength Showcase Peer Leader and Sources Team Award winners. The Oregon Sources of Strength Showcase celebrates students and adults working to create belonging and connection in their schools and communities, either through Sources of Strength programming or other youth-led suicide prevention efforts. Jill at Roosevelt, Avery at Sheldon, and the team at Spencer Butte were nominated by their friends, colleagues, or mentors because they have shown up this year as an agent of change and a connector to help in their school community, and are working to raise awareness around mental health and suicide prevention by spreading messages of hope, health, and strength. I share these successes as a reminder to each of us the importance of our own mental health. I encourage everyone during this busy season of rushing towards the conclusion of the year to treat ourselves and one another with grace and compassion. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Superintendent Guy. Next, we have items raised by the audience. The school board receives written comments by email at board@4j.lane.edu and sets aside time in each regular board meeting to hear public comment. Community members can sign up to speak to the board by submitting their request online at 4j.lane.edu/board/public comment or contact the superintendent's office. The deadline is the Monday before each meeting. Individual speakers are limited to 3 minutes and cannot give their time to another speaker. The timer will count up, indicating when the speaker's time has been reached. Speakers may offer objective comments or criticism about district operations and programs. For complaints about individuals, including district staff or board members, the district has a board policy and complaint process. Please contact the superintendent's office at 541-790-7707 for more information about submitting a formal complaint. Please also extend the same courtesy to members of the community. Please mind the time limit and the expectation of behavior. And tonight we have 7 people signed up to speak. They happen to all be in person. Debbie, will you introduce our speakers for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair Costa. Our first speaker tonight is Laura Wade. I just like to turn the microphone on.
Thank you. I believe that transgender people need to be provided safety and opportunity as they live their lives. I also believe that girls have the right to safe spaces and fairness in sports. Many say this is transphobic, but I say they are prioritizing concerns for trans people over concerns for women and girls. The state and the school board have been silent on or actively joining in on the infringement of girls' rights. In so doing, you are placing all young people who do not have the maturity to manage such big topics in ongoing stressful situations. My daughter was put in a hotel room with biological males while on a trip with the South Eugene High School Club without prior arrangement. I requested the leader not do this again. For that, I was called a bigot. I said nothing against any individual or spoke directly to the kids involved. I simply stated in an email that the act of putting my daughter in a hotel room with males who identify as gender non-binary should require the permission of the girl and the girl's parents. For this, the adult club leader replied by calling me a bigot and a transphobe and told me that my actions were likely illegal. She then further doubled down on these policies in reaction to my affront. I know she is trying to help trans people, but I believe she does not see how she is being misogynistic. So I asked the school to help step in and help these young people make their way on this topic. The South administration said that while this was concerning, there was nothing they could do. Apparently, they would rather trust all teenagers in all situations, even when participating in a school-based club activity. Other team members and other parents who question this policy are silenced by the fear of cancellation. I have waited more than 15 months for my kids to graduate, so they are less likely to be attacked for their mother's public statement. They are capable of speaking for themselves and are not part of my statement, which is, both trans people and girls have the right to be treated with respect. Both trans people and girls have rights to safety and respect for our wishes as long as they don't hurt anyone else. Parents have the right to expect that our schools are careful with the health and wellness of our children, be they trans or girls. But there is no basic right for any individual to sleep in a hotel with any underage female, let alone while on a school trip. And I do not believe there is a basic right for males to play in female sports. Just ask the teams we play against. And I believe girl athletes should have the right to sign up for a girls' team sport and expect that there won't be people on that team who went through male puberty taking her spot on the field. I request that the school board model respectful debate of these issues of inclusivity and stop letting the activists decide what's right for everyone else. We are seeing political backlash to these issues in other states, and I fear this for Oregon. Parents should feel comfortable speaking up for common sense and fairness. You should be an example to our community. Hold open discussion on this topic. Show that questioning the current path does not equal trans hate. Help stop the current silencing and shaming of reasonable people. Welcome feedback from girls. We need you to be a good example of what inclusivity actually means. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Wade. Next up, we have Julian White.
My name is Julian White, and I'm a ninth grader at South Eugene High School. I'm here to discuss the 4-day schedule change. The job of the school board is to improve the education of students in the district. The schedule change will do anything but that. Anyone at 4-day high school right now knows it can be hard to keep track of what you're learning with 5 classes, additional sports, clubs, maybe a job. Add 3 more classes all at the same time. You can't expect everyone to be fine if they'll just adjust to the new schedule. You can't adjust to an extra 3 classes worth of workload. This schedule change will have teachers and students with 2 options. The first of which would be to sacrifice important pieces of curriculum with lesson time. 2 days a week is not enough for a class to function. The second is to pile on the work anyway so that students don't miss out on their education. Let me remind you that these 8 classes would all be happening at the same time. Such a large increase in homework would be a crushing structure for many students if the increase happened in only 5 periods, much less 8. This new workload is not manageable for students, and it will cause them to make a choice between staying in failing district and sacrificing important parts of their life, like time with their friends and extracurricular activities, so that they can do schoolwork that should have been covered in class. Forcing students to lose instructional time will do nothing to further their education and will only increase stress, which high school students have enough of. Our trimester schedule is not perfect, but it works. Your proposed schedule makes no improvements and will only make students suffer. You can shake things up if you want, but this is not the way to do it. This generation of students have been forced to adapt to plenty of change already. We already had to deal with enough unnecessary change, and this does nothing to further our education and will only worsen our problems. Me and several other students from South Eugene High School collected 500 signatures over the course of 2 weeks across all high schools. I'm here to represent all of those people. Thank you.
Julian, will you share that, will you share that with Debbie so that we can?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker tonight is Ruby Stoker. Ruby Stoker, not here. Go to the next. Kara Ecraft.
Good evening, my name is Kara Beecraft and I'm a junior this year at North Eugene High School. I have a 4.0 GPA and I take my classwork seriously. I'm a varsity soccer player and track athlete at North, and I also work at Shepherd Motors as a car detailer in the summer. I'm speaking today because I'm consistently frustrated with the low standards that my classmates and I are held to based on the rules in place by the district. A few days ago in my IB History of the Americas class, my teacher announced a homework assignment that is to be due on the following Wednesday. Upon announcing the due date of this assignment, she stated that students who turned the assignment in on time would be awarded a few points of extra credit. I had to ask my teacher for further clarification. I asked, "We will receive extra credit for turning this homework in on time?" My teacher replied by telling me yes. She needed students to complete this assignment by Wednesday so that we can talk about it in class that day. And she's unable to dock points for late assignments, so her only incentive for students to turn in their work on time is to offer extra credit. I have been consistently frustrated throughout this school year because I have experienced on many occasions other students receiving the same grade on an assignment that I turned in on time 5 weeks prior. It is increasingly frustrating that my teacher has to use extra credit as an incentive for students to turn in an assignment when it is due, rather than using a basic standard of punctuality such as a late policy. It is my understanding that this policy was put in place during the era of COVID-19 when school was strictly online and, as we know, was very difficult for many. It has been almost 2 years since students have been back in school full time and this rule is still in place. Most of these students have only had a due date free high school experience. This standard only practices poor work ethic and problem solving skills for students and needs to be stopped. I have an older sister who just completed her freshman year of college at Montana State University in Billings. She, like me, is a dedicated student athlete who is committed to working hard and doing her best. She was very successful in high school, receiving a 4.0 GPA and completing a CTE pathway in health sciences. My sister Warren has stated multiple times that she struggled greatly in college because she was not suitably prepared by her high school. It is extremely difficult to transition to living on your own, being a student athlete, managing a job, and adjusting to the new idea of hard deadlines and a heavy workload all at once. I would like to acknowledge that all students come from different backgrounds and have different responsibilities that can add to the school workload, but it is important to note that despite their backgrounds and other responsibilities, each of them will have to enter the workforce where soft deadlines are non-existent and late work could mean a lost job. Once again, I'm speaking today because I have hope that the school board has the better interests of the students in mind and will be committed to helping them develop practices that will help them succeed in the future.
Thank you, Ms. Beecroft. Next up we have Mariko Maddock.
Hello, my name is Mariko Maddock, and I'm a parent of 2 daughters. One went through YG K-5 program, and another one is currently in a 6th grade YG program. I also have been teaching a YG program since my first year of teaching career in 4J. Since I was hired in 2004, I have worked on all 3 different levels of YG program. North Eugene High School, Kelly Middle School, and currently in YG Elementary in 5th grade. In my almost 20 years of teaching, I've witnessed a lot of changes for the program. Every time there was a change, we adjusted our curriculum so that we could provide the best instruction to YG students. These past few years have been the toughest changes I have personally experienced mentally and emotionally. It's not only tough for teachers, but also rough for students to constantly adjust needs and give up a lot of traditions and cultural events that we're able to do prior to our publication. In 2020, we had to leave our YG building on Silver Lane, and we're told that North Eugene building location will be the option for a future space for YG. In the district document, program move FAQ, Eugene Garden to Kelly, it clearly states that the old North Eugene High School building is a future space for YG, Kelly, Corridor, and other programs. Now the board has voted to demolish the building, and we are being told that there isn't enough funding to do that original plan from the bond measure. Not only it is deeply disheartening for our North Eugene community, but it is a major problem for voters that are counting on the details of this bond being followed. When you survey YG in a community, please publish what the community is saying and let them be a voice in your decision-making process. As you move forward with your decision about the future of Kelly and YG, please remember that both schools have homes in North Region. YG's home is on Silver Lane. Please continue considering a home for us at the old North Eugene High School site. We want a sustainable future for our YG program in our North Region. We are looking forward to a guaranteed decision so that we don't have to worry about this issue anymore, and we can finally focus completely on learning and teaching. 30 years ago, I first came to the States as a high school exchange student and learned English as a second language. I came back to this country because I appreciated how much teachers care about me, and I wanted to do the same thing for my students in return. I wanted to share the joy of learning with students in this program. I know that we all value and support students with diverse backgrounds. Please demonstrate through action that our school board and superintendent support our diverse community of learners.
Our next speaker tonight is Heather Anderson, and then we will conclude with our exam.
Hello, my name is Heather Anderson and I attend Eugene. I am in 5th grade and I have been here since kindergarten. I have made so many memories with the YG staff and students. I was only in 2nd grade when I heard the building was going to be demolished. I was as crushed as a baby. In 2017, school district representatives explained to us that they were going to build a new North Eugene High School right on top of our site. They told us that we would be moved to Kelly Middle School, but that it would be a 3 to 5 year relocation. They have made promises, but do they intend to keep their word? We are 3 years into our relocations, and now they are saying that we won't be moved until we move. One of our options we were given was to go to the south side of town, but that's not the best option because over 60% of our students live on this side of town. Another option was portables, but where would we put them? The last option was that we stay here, but each year new students will be coming. Is there any other option on this side? I believe that Kelly Middle School should have their school back. The building for Kelly is getting old. In fact, a couple of years ago, the inner gym collapsed. Next year, I will be in 6th grade, but I am going to Kelly, so I will fight for this as long as I can. Not just for me, but for everyone in Kelly Township. Thank you.
Thank you, Heather Anderson. Principal.
All right, thank you. Thank you, 4J, board, staff, Superintendent Dye, student representatives. I would like to add, if you didn't make it to North Eugene High School for the Addams Family production, what were you thinking? You missed out. It was incredible. Great job, Parker. I would like to, I guess, address what is top of my mind. We are going to have 4 new board members starting next year, and so I'd like to congratulate the 4 winners of this election. I think it's really exciting that we're going to have some new blood. I'd like to thank Director Shu and Hasija Kaufman for their interim time on the board, Director Hayes for your many years as a school board director, and Director Lafer, who is really one of the few sitting members that was willing to reach out to me and talk to me as a person and to see what my motivations were for coming and speaking to the board. So who am I? I'm Harry Sanger. I ran for the school board 2 years ago. I ran because I didn't like what was going on in 4J around COVID. I have 2 young children, and I wanted them to get an excellent education. I think the third speaker kind of spoke to some of our declining expectations that occurred during COVID, and I hope that the new board's ready to pick that up and run with it and get us back to pre-COVID levels and even beyond that. So yeah, I'm a husband, I'm a father, I'm a community member, I'm a volunteer. I'm not any of the things that some people will say about me online, and I think it's a real shame that we have these conversations online where people say things that they would never say to each other in person. I think we need to look at how technology impacts our mental health and our students and how it's used by the youth in our community. So, with that said, I think we do have a lot of shared goals. We have different ways of getting to those goals. We have different approaches, but listening to the 8 candidates who ran for the school board, when the questions were asked in general terms, they had the same answers. They want the same things. It's just the path to get to those things that was different. So for the 4 candidates that did not win the election, thank you very much for running. That takes a lot, I know. You put a lot into this, the board does. I don't know if everybody sitting here recognizes that, but it's an investment of time and energy, and even to run. So yeah, thank you for that. I would just like to say we had some excellent comments tonight, and the first speaker, spoke to holding open discussions. I hope we can do that next year. Parents don't feel heard on many issues. We've heard that, and particularly on YG. I mean, that North Eugene Theater is phenomenal. I can't believe we're just going to bulldoze that into the ground. That doesn't make sense to me. That can be a community asset that we could use, and I think we heard from several speakers tonight how important that is. And then we also heard a lot about the schedule for next year, and that's just somewhere where decisions have to be made. They're tough, but when we see a petition with 500 people on it, we probably need to be having more conversations and hearing from the community more. So I charge the new board with listening to the community, and I look forward to the new energy. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sanger. And for our next last speaker, my apologies, I forgot to include him in my paperwork. Eugene.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity for us to come here and comment. My name is Ibra Taher. I'm a philosopher by training. I have 3 kids. 2 of them are in 4J. Actually, one of them in Churchill High School. I know I look young, but yeah, I have a freshman there, and the other one goes to Kim. I'm here today because I think there is a common misunderstanding from the board, from the educators and those involved in the decision making of what can be taught, what can we do in our school system, or maybe what is the purpose of public education. When we think about it, we don't have any community debate about what is the purpose of public education. Did we have that? I don't think so, not recently at least. So I want to formulate my comment as questions and ended up with one request. And they hope that these questions get answered. Maybe it would motivate a new type of debate. We need to hear these answers. If I tell you that I have certain ideologies of my own, I have certain ideologies, I have religious beliefs, I have different worldviews. If I come here to the board and ask you, can you please teach these ideologies in our schools? What would be the response? I can tell you, I would say no. We cannot let you do that because these are public schools. There is no place for ideologies and politics and any type of activism in schools. We are focused on specific things. So these specific things should motivate us in terms of how we teach our kids, what are our kids involved in and exposed to. So if that question is, the answer to that question is no, then acknowledging that Eugene is diverse, then what allowed you, what justified you to promote your ideologies in our schools? What justified pushing certain ideologies in our schools? What? If we don't have an answer, a clear answer for that, then what really allows us to continue doing these things, to promote certain ideologies? And namely, when we talk about ideologies, worldviews, philosophies, we are talking about things that are related to parents. We teach our kids what it is good and wrong, what is moral or not. My kids in Kennedy High School, all the time, send me photos of things like be gay, sexual lifestyle. Why do you promote it? It's everywhere.
Can you please wrap up?
And I'll do that. But in general, we need to have that question. What right do we have to push our ideologies on other kids? Or what rights do the board have to do that? And my request, this, the last one, please stop promoting ideologies that are your own. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Tager. Thank you to all the community members who took the time to come speak with us. Next up on our agenda, we have our consent group items for action. There are 5 items on the consent agenda tonight. Is there a motion? Alicia is moving to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second? So moved by Alicia to approve the consent agenda and seconded by Michelle Shu. Is there any discussion? Okay, in that case, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. We have the unanimous approval of the agenda, of the motion with 5 ayes from Ira Basta, Alicia Hayes, Judy Newman, Gordon Lafer, and Michelle Shu. Next up, we have items for information. We have 2 of these tonight. Up first is to receive okay, the presenter for the first item had to step out. So we will jump to number 2 and then go back to number 1. So number 2 is to receive a legislative update from our legislative.
Hey, don't those guys get to talk, or we get to talk? Yeah, sorry, we're getting out of here fast today.
Thank you. I jumped ahead, didn't I?
I was like, not gonna say anything. I thought maybe you had a plan.
Oh, I have a plan. No, I'm kidding. Yes, thank you, audience. Thank you, fellow board members. In fact, our next agenda item is to receive comments by employee groups. Can you please take the mic, Sabrina?
Thanks, Maya.
Sorry.
It's okay. Normally it wouldn't even matter, but ironically, my statement tonight is about something that you just approved in the consent agenda. But I'm gonna read it anyway. Tonight I want to give the board some context for a vote you will be taking. The consent agenda included a 3-year renewal of the contract for Canvas, which is the learning management system that is used in our middle schools and our high schools. That vote tonight is a perfect example of why it's important for the board to hear the perspective of educators and how your decisions directly impact us and in turn our students. Canvas was first purchased in an emergency situation during COVID as a tool to help learning continue during distance and hybrid modes of teaching. At the time, we all knew we were starting down a digital path for which there would be no return. Now, a few years later, teachers have invested time in learning how to use this tool, and they report several reasons why they value it. Some of those reasons are that it aids in communication between general educators and special ed peers. It is a place to embed supports to make instruction more accessible, and it helps some students with organizational skills. The description given in your board packet lists several available components of Canvas, and they probably all sounded great. It is a useful tool, but as with any tool, it's only as useful as humans make it. And therefore, the investment the district makes in this tool must go beyond purchasing it. That investment needs to include training, time, and professional trust. Teachers need training on how to use the many components available in Canvas during the workday, not in online modules to be viewed on their personal time. This includes current staff as well as new hires. I hope the board would ask whether and how we are building in time for that training. Using Canvas also creates the need for more prep time. Before we had this tool, no teacher ever had extra time. So where does the time come from? Time is needed in August before school begins, anytime courses change such as semester transitions, and during every week throughout the school year. I hope the board would be interested to hear from teachers about whether they have enough time. Many still report that they update Canvas during their evenings and weekends. Once training and time are provided, trusting the professional judgment of educators as to which components of Canvas work best for their students and their content will make it a great tool rather than a required nuisance. The more training, time, and professional trust that is provided for the use of Canvas, the more effective of a tool it will be. So when you consider this investment, please only do so if you also plan to insist on the conditions which are required to make it a good investment. It seems like a fair ask and the best use of public funds. Thanks for listening and for asking deeper questions when presented with recommendations. Educators see this as one of the board's most important roles, and we appreciate you for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sabrina.
I feel like we should go back and forth.
Yeah. Well, we can go forward and vote again if we want to do that. We can also include some other comments. And again, I apologize. I don't believe, do we have Sheila online? I know we're not hearing from Seth today. There's no Sheila anyway. So now we move on to comments and committee reports by individual board members. Do I have a volunteer to go first? All right, I heard Alicia first, but then Judy, you can jump in after her.
First, just thank you to everybody that came and spoke, and particularly the students. It's a little scary at that table. The first time I did it. So thank you, and just the other thing for me is congratulations to the new board members. I'll make sure I leave my notebook for you, so with all my notes in it, whoever actually will take position number one. So congratulations, and that's all I have.
Deletion, Judy?
Just want to echo the thank you for the comments, and I always learn a lot and it gives me a lot to think about and consider. And I want to thank our staff and our community partners. I know the students brought up the situation at South Eugene High School, and I appreciate everyone taking this so seriously. I know everyone's getting weary, and I hope we can get to the bottom of this and not see an increase in disruption. So I just appreciate people taking swift action and working together. I do want to talk a little bit about this month, which is Asian American and Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And it's an annual celebration that recognizes the historical and cultural contributions of individuals and groups of Asian and Pacific Islander Islander descendants that live in the United States. At our last meeting, our fellow board member Kirti Krishija Kaufman challenged us to identify a famous Asian American. And I must agree with her, it took me some thinking for a minute, but then many individuals started coming to mind. And I just wanted to mention two, that people that I've really been admired for a long time. First is Tammy Duckworth. She's the first Thai American elected to Congress. And I'm sure many of you are aware of her. She's a US Senator from Illinois since 2016, and before that she served as a state representative in Congress. But she was the first, as I said, Thai American woman elected to Congress, but also the first woman with a disability elected, and the first double amputee in the Senate, and the first senator to give birth while in office. She's a pretty incredible person. She's a retired Army National Guard lieutenant, a colonel who received a Purple Heart during her service in Iraq War. And she champions infrastructure bills, environmental justice issues, especially lead poisoning, which is a very big problem in Chicago, minority-owned businesses, affordable higher education tuition, and fully supporting veterans. The second person is someone that we also all know, is Kamala Harris, the first Asian American Vice President of the United States. She's the daughter of Indian and Jamaican immigrants, and she, in addition to being the first woman and Asian American to hold the office, and she's the highest ranking female in our government ever in the United States. Before becoming Vice President of the United States, she served as a district attorney in California for 8 years and started a groundbreaking program to provide first-time drug offenders the opportunity to earn a high school degree and find employment. She was California's Attorney General for 6 years, where she defended the Affordable Care Act in court, enforced environmental law, and was a national leader in the movement for marriage and equality. And then she was elected as a senator from California in 2017 and became vice president in 2021. These are two really amazing women, Asian American women, and have done and are still really representing, I think, really important issues in Congress. We're fortunate also, I just want to call out for Jay to have both a Japanese language immersion program and a Chinese language immersion program. I know YG is the first public Japanese immersion program in the nation, and very proud of it, and the Chinese immersion, which is now K-12. So both programs include the richness of learning and living the culture of these countries, the learning and living in the culture of these countries. And I'm proud to have these in our district.
Thanks, Judy. Board member Michelle? Michelle?
I've been away for a bit, so I missed a lot of the excitement and issues that occurred in the last month. I'm also pleased to hear that the district is taking all the threats very seriously and prioritizing the safety of the students. Thank you, Judy, for your
we're recognizing that it's Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. There will be an assembly at Churchill High School on Friday. It will be their first ever, it might be the first ever Asian American and Pacific Islander assembly in 4J. So that's happening Friday morning.
Thanks, Michelle. Gordon, you just disappeared. Are you ready to go, or should I go first? I don't see him popping back on, so I'll go ahead and jump in. Okay. As you can likely tell, I'm struggling not to lose my voice, so I'm going to keep my comments short. I'm going to start by apologizing again for putting things out of order, and I am officially putting in a vote of please, if we're going to support this investment, let's make sure that the investment is well-rounded and includes time for teachers to learn and to be able to use this tool in the broadest possible way. I'm very happy to hear that it has become a tool that teachers are indeed embracing and appreciating. I want to be sure, like Alicia, to congratulate the folks who were elected to serve on this board yesterday. So congratulations to Tom DiLiberto, Jenny Jonak, Morgan Monroe, and Rick Hamilton. I personally am very excited for a career teacher to be bringing their voice to the board work that we do. Thank you to the four of you, as well as to all the candidates who ran, for caring about 4J and for stepping up to ask the community to support you to be a volunteer board member. I look forward to getting to know each of you and to having you join us as we continue the work of making 4J an exemplary place to both learn and work. I also want to acknowledge the extremely traumatic and frightening events that have taken place at South Eugene High School. Sending threats to violently harm folks while they are in school is a vile and despicable way to instill fear in a community. I'm grateful that threats have proven to not be viable and that our South community has in fact been physically safe. That said, the emotional impact of these repeated threats has serious potential to negatively impact our collective and individual mental health. It is my understanding that students and staff have been extended the opportunity to process these experiences with mental health experts. I hope everyone who needs extra support pursues the resources made available. I want to emphasize that ensuring the safety and security of our students and staff is amongst our district's highest priorities, and I'm grateful for our staff's swift and serious treatment of these threats and the community partnerships that kept our students and staff safe. Thank you. Gordon, I see you're back. I'm gonna hand it over to you.
Thank you. I want to first just say something in response to the public comment about ideology in schools. I'm not entirely sure what was meant, and I'm not assuming to speak for the speaker. But I want to be clear that I think that inclusion, equality, respect, welcoming, and celebration of trans students, queer students, gender fluid students, undocumented students, and all others is something that this board considers not as some people's particular ideology, but as a fundamental fact of human rights. Some members of the community see that differently, and that's their right. But it's the responsibility of the board to stand up for and protect those rights for all students, especially at a time when it's exactly those groups of students who face the most increased harassment and nationally face the highest suicide rates. It's critical that we continue to do so, and I certainly hope the future board will continue to uphold that principle. I'm looking forward to hearing the discussion about Kelly and YG. I continue to hope that we're working towards guaranteeing a building of its own, Kelly having its building and YG having its own building, both in the North region. I know it's true that as one of the people who offered testimony this evening said that Kelly and YG community was misled by the board that was in office in 2018. I think there's no more important form of transparency than being straight with people when making decisions about their schools. And I think that this is a time when, you know, as many people have said, we have to go out of our way to try to do right by communities that have that were in that situation. One of the things that I hope that we'll be able to do before the end of this year is to set aside funds to create a librarian for Kelly Middle School. That'd be the first middle school librarian restored in 4J in 20 years. I think that would be a good place to do it. Since our last meeting, had the great opportunity of visiting Camas Ridge School and getting to participate in morning singing and guitar playing. But apart from the music, I'm just so impressed by the model that Camas Ridge offers of project-based learning and of play as education. I hope the board can have a presentation of that at some point to highlight the great things happening there and to think about how we can support similar pedagogy in other schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Gordon. If there's no objection, I suggest we don't revisit the consent agenda unless somebody. Okay, thank you, I appreciate that. So the consent agenda stands as approved. Now, we have items for information, and we can go in order. Up first is presentation by Jenna McCauley, our Communications and Intergovernmental Relations Director. She's gonna fill us in on the research and fact-finding review that she led the district.
Good evening. Thank you so much for having me here and for the opportunity to keep this project moving forward. This evening, we are going to cover a little bit about the research and data that we've collected in response to a lot of the questions and the board's authorization to keep this project moving forward on a very ambitious timeline. But before we get going, I think that one of the most important things is to really just start with how we got here. And so it's been acknowledged multiple times that this particular project was confusing from the start. I think that there were a lot of great intentions, and unfortunately at the time, it sounds like, as I have navigated through past documents, etc., that a lot of the work happened in silos. And so we had really well intentions, but not a lot of connection to have fact-based decision-making on what was going to be feasible and what that might really cost. So I appreciate the board's approach this time in allowing us to aggregate all of the options, have an opportunity to work across departments, and present to you our best information available. Make sure that we are all on the same page as we move forward into an important section of community engagement, and that everyone has access to the same information, so that where we're starting from is the best estimate for any new home. Couple that with the pandemic, and you had a recipe for a lot of confusion, changeover of staff, and you landed us here today. In the board packet, and shared with you in your Friday memo, was a response to all of the requests of any and all property that is owned in the North region. The community, the board asked the district to be thorough in evaluating all of the space that we owned and honor the desires that we have been hearing to keep the two programs in the North region. So what we shared with you was a listing of all district-owned properties and the proposed solution for some of those locations. We worked with our facilities team and our finance team to collect good faith estimates of based on today's cost and potential escalation. No one could have expected what we saw in the pandemic, so we based it upon regular inflation. Of adding either new construction to those spaces or modulars to those spaces, and then approximations on when that project may be complete, so that we are clear with our community as we go forward in community engagement that the timeline is realistic, something that we can stick to, it's something that we believe is feasible. That list was shared with you, and if you would like, I'm happy to answer specific questions about it, but I also have a few that I'd like to point out just to make sure, again, that we have a shared understanding of the options before us. I want me to just pick some out. That'll be sure we can pick some out. I think of particular interest that I want to make sure is here for the board and for our community. You'll see two notations on there about renovating the 850 Howard site. One of them is the work that the subcommittee and the board subcommittee have been working on regarding responding to concerns that were raised by the communities in their co-location, current challenges that they face. Hallway concerns, space concerns, things like that, within the $12 million budget that has been allocated. You'll see finances here shortly, but that first notation is the unprioritized list. So that work of that committee was collecting feedback from their stakeholders, reviewing it, and then the next step was to be prioritizing prior to the board deciding to move forward on an expedited process. The second notation there is based upon conversations with our facilities team about addressing all of the list. So if the community provides feedback and the board decides that the updates with 12 million would not be sufficient to meet the needs or the desires of that particular community, and that there is funding streams that they would find or that you would identify. The facilities team believes that there are paths forward with either separation or just addressing everything on that list. So that's why the 2 locations on that particular site. The other thing that I would call to your attention is renovating and repurposing the 200 North Monroe space. You're gonna see a fairly large number on that one, and I think that the reason for that is we wanna be realistic about what the potential costs could be, so we don't find ourselves in another situation where we have unintentionally overpromised. And also, you don't see it disaggregated about all of the possible solutions that could be available if the board decided to move forward with thinking differently about 200 North Monroe, which is the site we're at right now. This property in its entirety is zoned for educational purposes and currently houses programming. So at Echo, for example, if the board identified the fiscally responsible solution would to be to move the administrative services, which is not included in that total, it opens up a great deal of possibilities, but we didn't want to disaggregate all of the options with that because we don't want to have unintended consequences that domino other programs. So we don't want to start talking about what other programs may change and create undue anxiety until there's a little bit more direction from the board and the community. And then finally, I wanted to call out a property that has come forward several times around the Admiral Street. That is the property that is in the district's land bank currently. It is something that they made strategic choices on many years ago to purchase in anticipation of needing another school out in that area in response to proposed or presumed growth in building, etc. The costs that you'll see there are higher than building on other sites, building on other locations, things like that. And that is in large part due to the fact that it is undeveloped. So as opposed to placing modulars or building a new build on developed land where utilities exist and services are already there, that would be a cost that would have to be included in this particular scenario. Additionally, it includes an estimate from our facilities team, which again is their best guess around the impact of improvements that we would be required to make to the area, sidewalks, traffic impact analysis improvements, things like roundabout or stoplights or things like that may be required. So you'll see that that is again a different cost than the other locations, and the reason for that is they want to make sure that we are overestimating if need be so that we don't find ourselves in a similar situation to we do now. Then I'm going to pause and give you an opportunity if there are any questions you have about the possible options. Again, this is just the information sharing time. So if there are things that you would like us to make sure are clear, then we are getting ready to go out to our community and solicit their feedback. Let me know. Does anybody have any questions?
You don't have to answer this right now, but what do you need from us as a board for this evening to help narrow this down so that, you know, of course, I would love to have a decision made in the next 2 meetings before I leave the board. I doubt that's going to happen. What do you need
That is
to
the
help you?
frame that you all have put on it, so I hope that happens, and thank you so much, it's actually coming right up, is what the ask of the board is this evening. But again, to ensure that we're all on the same page prior to moving to our community engagement and ensuring that our community understands what the options and parameters are, we did want to go ahead and fulfill the request of the financial considerations. So there was a request around clarifying where and how much money we have, where did it come from, how did we get here? What you will see before you is $12 million that is currently allocated to address the co-location challenges at the 850 Howard site. That comes from the $5 million that is remaining in the bond that was identified to support program moves. So again, I think that back to that conversation around best intention, but without enough detail, the program moves of $10 million was to address lots of moves. So changes to the Willard site, changes to the current 850 Howard location to allow for smaller restrooms for elementary kids, etc. In order to get to that 12 million number, we have 7 million added that is from bond premiums, project savings, and interest. And while this is probably familiar with the board, I just will give a little bit of background around that, what that means. When a municipality sells a bond, they get approval from the public, from their constituents, to essentially acquire the debt. They have the opportunity to then go sell it at the market, and there's a possibility that they sell it for higher, so the rates are better, they're in our favor. That's what's called a bond premium. Project savings are when a project comes in under budget, so those cost estimates that we gave you, if they end up being lower, then that would be the project savings pieces. And obviously, as you would imagine, when you're talking in the millions of dollars, it accrues its own level of interest. So the interest off of the current bond funds is what gets you to the 7, which is what makes 12 million currently allocated and available. There's been a lot of conversations or questions around bond funds, and so a quick little breakdown and the lesson that I learned from our finance and our facility folks is how we've approached managing that bonds. We went out for an amazing bond. Our community gave a humongous gift to this district, and we have been responsibly using it. So we don't do it as taking on acquiring debt. You don't do it all at the same time because we know that we're not going to start all of the projects at the same time. So we've sold components of the bond. Our spending capacity is up to that 319.3 million. And you'll see on there that we've sold chunks of it as we needed, as we've done our projects and built out the Gillum expansion, Edison, etc. Somebody had asked what is remaining. So 49.3 million is yet to be sold. So that would be sort of the remaining funds that are available. The challenge with that is they are allocated. So when a municipality or government entity goes out and requests spending authority from their constituents, they have to be fairly clear on what it is that they're going to use that project for. Does that mean that you couldn't use this? Not necessarily. It would take additional review by bond counsel so that they had an opportunity to really make sure that we are following the law if we reallocated any of that, or if the board decided that this project needed additional funds. The trade-off, however, is just like any home budget, etc. You can't necessarily buy a car and boat at the same time. You have to make trade-offs. You can't necessarily get the refrigerator fixed and roof fixed at the same time. You have to make those trade-offs. So I would just remind you and our community, this will be posted online for folks to review, that we have identified projects. So as you're reviewing what the trade-offs might be, you would have to go through the bond list and identify the ones that would not be completed this round. Additionally, there were 2 other funds that had some questions around them, the ESSER funding, and I'm told by Matt Brown that we have $20 million in ESSER funds that are out there. Those are one-time funds with defined uses and purposes. They must be expended by 2024. We did do some research because we had the request to be as creative as possible, and we have found that there is a narrow pathway in which we could potentially not be in possession of all of the equipment by 2024. It's not recommended, but there is an avenue for situations in which that might not work. However, I don't believe that there has been any guidance around how long that could be extended. I think that the intent would be in a short term if it's something that we've already expended. So if we prepay for something, for example, was the question. The other thing with that is they've already been allocated. So there was conversations around, well, what about the 11 million that we were gonna send for UF? Back in the fall, when the district was looking at potentially utilizing some of those funds, they hadn't been allocated to the full extent. Now we have a laundry list of projects and staff members that are associated. So again, should the board decide that they'd like to review and reallocate some of that, it's a trade-off. And then finally, the property fund. So there was a question around the Roosevelt sale. So when we sold the Roosevelt property to a YMCA, the district received about $5.5 million in revenue, and that was placed into a property acquisition fund. Historically, the boards have utilized that as property for property. So if we release a portion of our land bank, then we save that so that we are fluid enough to then purchase or increase as needed. Additionally, I was told that this is one of the funds that we're able to tap into for moving expenses. So things that are not legally covered by the bond, things like the impact that it has on our staff to pack up their classroom, unpack their classroom. We provide additional duty hours and additional extended contracts. And so those things come from this fund typically. So, any questions about financial consideration? What we need from you is focus.
I have a question. I first want to acknowledge something and then my question follows it up, because this feels like a conversation that has become hyper-focused on YG, which I appreciate, but I think that the unspoken component of that is that we're talking about YG specifically with the intention of possibly making it so these schools were not co-located. So the Kelly component of this conversation, I just don't want it to be lost or overshadowed. And so my question is, all of these talk about what it would take, apart from the two where it's stay at 8:50 Howard, what would it take for YG to have a new location that's exclusive to them? And I'm wondering if we are also keeping in mind the need to return that space to being a middle school space, like you mentioned, the bathrooms. And I'm sure there's plenty of other things that Kelly would love to see happen to restore, let alone expand and grow, but at least restore the space to be usable for middle schoolers. So I don't exactly have it off the top of your head because I didn't tell you in advance, it just came to me now, but I'd love to know what we'll need to do if we take one of these options for YG where they are not on site anymore. What do we need to do to make Kelly able to offer an optimal program and also be a place that is somewhere people really feel proud of working at?
Excellent question, and I have copied that down so that we can address it. Primarily at this point, those would be operational questions and conversations and an opportunity to fall into that phase 3 when it's long-term planning. So I think that those would be excellent conversations for the community to have. What we can absolutely provide you in a short term would be the cost should YG relocate to another location, what the cost of returning the building to its pre-YG state would be. Given the great deal of cost constraints, I do not imagine a time at this particular juncture, because it wasn't identified as a bond project. That would be definitely something that you could include in future conversations around funding sources and things like that. But in this iteration, we can definitely include the cost of returning Kelly to the pre-YG state.
Thank you, I appreciate that is, as we're looking at these numbers, I feel like all of these numbers need to be this number plus whatever, because, you know.
Great, to Alicia's question, I appreciate that. The next step is actually, my favorite, is the stakeholder engagement component, where we are going to take this set of available alternatives to the communities to decide and define what it is that they see as pros and cons of these locations. There's quite a list, and we have quite a short timeline. And so the question before the board today is, are there any that are obviously less optimal and less viable? So the board and our community charged us with being creative about possible solutions, so we included every property. If you would like us to move forward, we can absolutely do that and engage our community on every alternative. But if there are some that stand out as clearly less viable than others, that would help us focus our work.
Okay, I have another question or comment. I think this should be included in the community feedback. You know, we have on here not just estimated fiscal impact, but also estimated timeline. And none of them say 2024. And I think that part of our conversation needs to be something. So, okay. So I think part of our conversation needs to also be what happens with YG if we are looking at, I'll just throw it out, Howard Elementary, building on that space. And I think that I'd like to hear from the YG community as well as the Kelly and anybody who wants to throw their 2 cents in about what seems to me the obvious pathway is that we would need to use Willard the way that it was designed to be used as a transition school, or what do you call it? It sounds a lot more exciting than what I'm describing. So that this doesn't drag on. 3 years is literally the life cycle of a middle school student. So we're looking at impacting hundreds of middle school students the longer we prolong that shift. So I just want to make sure that that's included in that conversation, and I'll leave that to you to design out.
Absolutely. I appreciate that. And like I said, it's a very ambitious timeline to get you enough information for you to make a well-informed decision by the meeting on the 21st of June. However, I think that we've heard from our community over and over that they are prepared to move forward, and that helping them establish what their future will look like is important, which is why our process doesn't end when we make a decision. So we have identified the need for a third phase, recognizing that we're heading into the summer, that there is going to need to be additional conversations when we come back in the fall, not just around design, but operational decisions. So I know that our instruction team is prepared to help facilitate conversations with our administrators in the short term, and then I can absolutely include feedback around the possibility of utilizing the swing school.
Utilizing it, I know it's on there as an option for permanent, but I'm speaking specifically to swing school as the swing school.
Yes. She does it, that's all me, and Judy.
Okay. I actually think that I think we should make the long-term decision and then consider the transition, because I don't think Willard's the only, people, and I agree, we should talk to the community because Willard could be available for that. But there's also the option of staying where they are and not having 2 disruptive moves, if it's a preference, why something's being built. So I think that should come after we make, and it's important to not forget that.
I 100% agree, and I also want to return to reminding us that this isn't just a conversation about YG, it's also about.
Yeah, they would both be involved in it.
So, looks like you have. No. Alicia.
Thanks, Maya. Okay, I just have to be clear on the timeline, because we have a lot of people staring at us back there. So I just want to clear, are you saying that in our last meeting of this year, June, whatever it is, we as a board would be making a decision to say YG's doing this, YG's doing this, and Kelly's doing this? And YG, are we as a board gonna be saying, go out to the community when school starts again with these three options? What's your whole?
I would presume to say what you may do, but what the board actually directed the district at their last meeting was a timeline that had 3 phases, and the community engagement phase wrapped up by the 21st. So that at your meeting on the 21st, you had the most information available to you, so that hopefully you could make decisions, allowing us to actually meet some of the estimated timelines. Because if we wait until the fall, it then pushes back any additional construction timeline, design timelines, things like that. So ambitious is where it started, but that would be dependent upon the board feeling confident that they have the information that they need in order to make a well-informed decision for these communities.
So I think that'd be great. My concern is, I think that takes away a little of the what if. And I don't mean pie in the sky what if, but I know that when we did our community meeting, and you touched on it, what if, and we don't want to talk about other programs, but what if you moved out of this school, out of this program? And I just, if we can't nail down that it's a reality, like that we have all the ducks in a row, then how do we go out to the community without disappointing the community again? Yes, and you don't have to answer it, that's just my concern. And I wish I could call on you, but we don't take.
I know.
But I did want to recognize you raised your hand, even though I'm not the chair, I just want the power. So that's all I'm asking. I appreciate the timeline and I see why we need to do it, but if it takes away legitimate possibilities that people would be more interested in, how do we balance that? And I don't want to answer, I just talking to the people behind you, that could be a possibility. And I got one more of mine, and I promise I'll stop after that.
You're on a roll.
So here's mine, because I'm leaving the board. YG stays in North. It doesn't stay co-located with Howard the way it is. Something gives. So those are 2 of my big. There's others, but those are. You will hear that again on the 21st from me. Okay. I mean, they could swing school if something comes up, but permanent.
I appreciate that, and I do want to acknowledge that my time with Eugene has taught me that we love to dream big. And however, I don't want us to get caught in the what if in lieu of being able to make movement forward for communities that have been kind of stuck in the what if. And so I appreciate that, and I don't think that there is a firm and final, but I do believe that we will ferret that out when we speak with our community around their desire for what if. I think the goal was just to make sure that we had as much information available so that we were all having a conversation with the same pool of knowledge.
I appreciate that, thank you.
Does anybody else want to jump in? If not, I have another question. Could I actually?
Well, that being said, I'm just curious, so the one obvious one on here is the 200 North Monroe, that is many unknowns. So is there any idea of when we might know? I mean, if it's like 2 or 3 years from now, that's a long time to wait. If it's.
That is so dependent upon so many other dominoes. I think that the question that I would pose, if that's one that the board chooses to leave on for community engagement, is the community's interest in exploring options at this location. So what we are asking is not for the community to make a decision, and that may be disappointing, but for their feedback on the available options, both pros and cons, because ultimately the decision lies with the board. And so our goal is to provide you with as much information around their preferences, their tolerance for more in-between time, more dreaming, I guess, if you want to use that. But it isn't for them to say, hey, board, do this. It's really just to provide you as many options and then the information on those alternatives as possible.
Okay, so I don't wanna be like a negative Nelly or whatever, but I'm looking again at the timeline next to the estimated physical impact. And I, as a board member, would like maybe in a memo or somewhere to know, there was the two categories and you referred to them as allocated. What are we throwing into the wind, in terms of the bond funds, which we haven't even discussed using the bond council yet, and in terms of those ESSER funds as well. I think that's an important component. Thank you for putting that back up there. Because otherwise, some of these could be possibilities with a different estimated timeline if we looked at that other option of future bond, right? So those estimated timelines, as I'm understanding them, are based on using these funds that are already allocated. Is that correct?
Those estimated timelines are based not on funds, so we disaggregated the two. The question that came to us was, well, what are the funding streams out there? What about bond? What about ESSER? The estimated timeline are if you made a decision and picked Admiral Street as your pie in the sky, if that started and authorized the district moving forward on June 21st, that is the timeline that's on there. So when we come to you on the 21st with information and feedback from your community, then you'll have the opportunity to say, we would like the district to look at X, Y, and Z and how we would fund it. So again, it would be talking to bond council, see the timeline previously presented allowed for a little bit of a buffer time so that we could do a little bit of research in between the community engagement in your last meeting. That doesn't work out quite as well, but we will do our best to align the information that we're able to gather and then any potential impacts, so like bond council review. So it is clear that there is a large preference for one option over another. We would bring you that with feedback around, so we would have a robust conversation. And if I recall, and I'm relying on memory after a very busy 3 weeks with many unintended events, it seemed as though we had asked for a work session to discuss part of this in advance of that.
And I just don't say it out loud, so I'm making sure that I understand this. I get that they are separated, but they really actually are pretty married. Because if we are going to be doing these things with that estimated timeline, we're not going out for a bond like tomorrow. So they have to come from these funding sources. So they really are connected. So what we could do is look at these as options with a shifted timeline if we were to fund it with a future bond. Sure. Okay, just needed to say it so I can understand. Judy?
I was thinking about that and I worry because when is it that we could go out for a bond again? 2028? Yeah, so that's some years out. We don't even know what kind of board we'll have. And we already ran into problems of a previous board thinking one thing and things changing. So that makes me nervous because I have seen our facilities list and the needs are huge. So I don't know that we could guarantee this being on a list in a future bond. I'm just being realistic, trying to learn from this experience. And so I guess I would probably, if I were going to say what are realistic options, I wouldn't put that one out as personally a realistic option.
I'm sorry, say that part again. Was that Admiral Street? I didn't hear a location.
Oh, no, I was just saying the idea of a future.
Gotcha.
And I think the only way we can get to a brand new brick and mortar building, personally, is through a bond. So for me, I would eliminate the Admiral Street because it's so far away, it's more expensive to develop, and I don't know what we get for that. So I'm just trying to get going on the conversation, so I sort of like, so I'm just suggesting that we look at, the options of modular buildings, the the other things on there, but not really look at a brick and mortar building and eliminate at this point, the Admiral property. I could probably go further, but I'm gonna stop there for now.
I appreciate that, and it's not a requirement that you eliminate, but I appreciate that feedback, that gives us some great guidance. As you'll note on there, after some robust conversations with my colleagues in facilities, there was discussion at one of the community meetings around what about a new building on an elementary site, there's space behind, where elementary is before the Red Barn. And you'll see on there that there's only the new build option listed, because when they evaluated the space and the site, modulars are horizontal, whereas new build would allow you to go up. So what I'm hearing you say is that there is a preference to be very clear that because a new building attaches to a bond, that this board is comfortable removing new build options from the discussions with the community for now, and leaving potential bond projects to future boards.
I think that's what I'm saying.
Well, I think that's what Judy's saying.
Yeah,
That-
that's I'm just throwing out.
Right, but use it this board,
Yeah.
so I just wanted
Yeah, so
to, okay, I just wanted, I don't,
Yeah,
I
no,
appreciate,
I'm not
I'm not
completely-
saying my position either way, but I just wanna make sure that, like, I just realized I can see it, Gordon, if I look up at the big screen, and please, if you wanna speak up, just kind of holler, because it's hard to see in the shared screen situation.
The reality, I'm sorry.
No, and you came up with options, and the options of the new build are not really an option, correct?
That would be for me to say. So I don't, the staff don't allocate funds to the board, and so the charge for us was get creative and what available property. So the questions from the community were, what is out there? And so we are trying to provide, again, to help with the question around, let's not dream, or what about what if, or can we look under this rock? Our goal is to put as much information out there so that we all have a shared understanding of the realities around each potential option.
Okay, so without a new bond, our options are limited to much.
Is that right?
Do we wanna formalize that?
Yeah. I would absolutely support that. I mean, we can't go out for a bond, and I don't think anybody wants to wait till 2029 to build in 30 kids. I think it's the first time I've said that, 31.
I would just, before you take a vote, I'd give you one additional piece of information. So there is new build listed that is not modular, that is not a new building. So again, still in the list of available alternatives is the option to make changes to the existing building, both within the currently allocated funding and then potentially increasing funding that would more formally separate the buildings. So when you're crafting language around a new build or not, just want to caution that you don't inadvertently remove an additional option.
Well, on that note, I would personally, as an individual board member, remove those options. I don't think that co-location is, having participated in those meetings for the last 2 years, I don't think anyone's gonna be happy in the long run if we end up with a co-location situation, so I would support both of those. I see them being interrelated, and I would be willing to suggest that we remove both of them, both new build and co-location. You go ahead, Alicia.
Just for clarification, co-location to you is also modulars on the Halifax.
Absolutely, because that would take up the green space, and then the first, the middle school today, as it stands now, for example. Any solution, whether it's, yeah, I think that it,
I just feel, for me, that there's not a lot of other options, even if I want to keep people in the North region. So I'm fearful of taking that off. I'd like to hear people's opinion on that, and I know one of the things you have going for you that I don't, is that you've been at the North meetings. But as a full board, I would like to leave it on, so. Again, you might be down on track.
I can appreciate that. I just think of the conflicting, you know.
So we're looking at it.
Yeah, I mean, I don't need to go into too many details, but.
I might offer this just as a possible solution. As a reminder, this is information for this evening, and the question before you just was, is there any that you know are not viable, and since there may not be alignment in ones that you're ready to remove, we still have a very critical step of speaking with our community. So we can always leave as many options as you'd like, we can leave them all, and continue to get feedback. So if the board is not comfortable or in consensus with removing, or we can leave them. And you can get feedback. You're not making a decision tonight on ultimately the outcome.
I appreciate that. I just worry that we're continuing the game of, you know, throwing something out that isn't.
Leaving it makes it seem like it's, I'm not sure that with the community feedback that we have received, that it should be an option. Because we have sat through multiple meetings and we have listened to feedback. And as Mike said, considering to not have it as an option might be a good decision.
Please, seems like you wanted to say something.
So on that, so it's the third one down, which I didn't see because modular wasn't there. So what I see is it retain, but it says it retains co-location, but really it creates a new building, right?
It would be new construction at the 850 Howard site. So that would be co-location, they would both have the same site. However, we have not dove very far into actual designs other than suggestions. So in speaking with our facilities, there's options to add space. So for example, at the North Region Subcommittee meeting, there was conversation around building multi-purpose space, building other options. With that more expensive remaining at 850 Howard option, it wouldn't be modulars, it would be new build that would create independent cafeterias, independent offices, independent libraries, those types of solutions. Again, the board may not see that as viable, and so we can take it off, or we can continue to keep it and receive feedback from our.
So it costs the 12 million and the 21, so at least.
I know, so when we started, that's where I started at, because I figured that one would cause some confusion. So currently allocated, we have $12 million, it's not in addition. So there's two options at 850 Howard. If the board chooses to allocate no additional resources and the community provides feedback and the board agrees that it should stay co-located, we can make small adjustments that would include addressing some of the priorities that were identified in the North Region meeting for $12 million. Or that cost could be beyond 12 million, it wouldn't be in addition to 12 million. So the option would be to address all of the pinch points while keeping both programs at the same location for the estimated cost of 21 to 23.
Yeah, I got that. And there's no modular included in that?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay, so that would be.
So then, what that is saying is that it's not a separate school on the site. It would be, there would be continued co-location within the building with the addition of some other spaces.
So what that addresses is the list of concerns that were identified by the North Region Subcommittee. It creates separation of space, so there isn't the pass-through. For example, we've heard very clearly concerns around access to the band room or things like that, where the location of the existing component of the building requires a great deal of crossover. that option at 850 Howard means that those challenges would be eliminated, but they would still be both at 850 Howard. So we would have 2 school sites immediately adjacent. So it would be some remodel, and I wouldn't presume to give you an accurate description of what that may look like, because again, that would be putting the cart before the horse. So if the desire of the community and then ultimately the board is, no, we want to keep it co-located, but we want to address it by adjusting the school site, then the charge would be for that phase 3 design a school site that houses both of those. And the estimated cost on renovation based on renovation square foot and the new build that would be presumed is what got to the 20.
So just for my fellow board members, and I can't, it has like link and it's blue and it won't let me click on it. So I can't see the list, but there are some things that are very much in direct conflict. And I don't see how they can both happen for both schools. And I think about the conversation that I've heard more recently than in the past about that front hallway. Both schools want that front hallway, so I don't know with the co-location how that gets addressed. And I don't mean to ask you to wade into the details now, but that's, and this is more to say, these are the type of things, and there's quite a few of them. The cafeterias, one school wants to, and one school doesn't want to put money into a second cafeteria.
So what I would offer is that, because I'm not hearing consensus, and again, just as a reminder, you guys are not making a decision, my recommendation would be leave that as an option and allow folks to give the feedback that says we don't believe that that is a realistic option. It allows for their voice to be really clearly heard in the process, and then the board isn't making a decision tonight that looks one way or the other. And it provides the community that key component that I think has been missing throughout the pandemic of their vetting of the available options.
So then I think that moves me to get in touch.
From feedback I heard, if there is additional time to hear from the community, I think there will be a reiteration that these options are not in alignment with what the 2 schools require.
That's fairly consistent with what I'm hearing, but again, I would offer that the charge was to hear from the community as broad as possible, and the next phase is solely devoted to that.
So I'd like to say thank you, and I think you should move forward with all that you have put on there, and I look forward to seeing how this all plays out, and really look forward to hearing from the community. Are you planning, because I talked in this, are you planning, input sessions, or, and have you talked about that? And I apologize if I don't know how the board will be involved.
You will be involved at the tail end because you have asked for
At the community meetings.
You are always invited.
So we can just come and be observers. We won't be there or have a role. Only just
I agree, it's time to move forward. I do have a suggestion, it may not be a good one. I honestly am just gonna say, I don't see how we're gonna be challenged to find, in the $20-30 million to do a new build. So I think if you keep that on, I think you need to put on, it would be for a future bond, and there's some risks and stuff. I mean, people can still talk about it, but I think we should be transparent. I just don't see where we have that much money sitting around.
I appreciate that. I think that is the purpose of this evening's conversation, is to clearly articulate that right now the district has allocated $12 million to this project. So we are seeking feedback from the community around the pros and cons of the options available within our existing budget. And the recommendation may come forward that that isn't enough, and they're asking the board to review any possible other funding streams. But that's the purview of the board. And so our job is to bring you as much information as possible to let you vet that. But to make sure that we all have a shared understanding, and in that vein, I'm going to share with you the tools that we're going to have for our community to track that. So we have launched a website where we're gonna keep this information, where all of the alternatives are listed, the cost estimates, funding information, and the FAQ that is in development from aggregating questions that we received at board meetings, the questions that have been submitted by the PTO from Eugene Brooklyn, the questions that I've collected from the North Region Subcommittee. We also have an opportunity for community to submit further questions, and we'll just keep that as a live document so that again, it's all in the same place, so that it is as clear and transparent to our community about what is available, what isn't available, and what would be required to make those options. The stakeholder meetings are being established. That is what I was working on prior to the interruption on Tuesday with our staff challenges. And so tomorrow we'll be meeting with the administrators and parent leaders. What we've heard very clearly articulated both at the board meeting, and I know that it's a value of our district, is that there is a great deal of families that are non-English speaking that participate in the dual immersion program that is at Kelly, so the Spanish immersion program. So we'll be identifying ways in which they can participate in their home language as well. Those meetings are intended to be both virtual and online. So again, it's a very aggressive timeline, but we'd like to provide you with as much information for you to make a good decision as possible. Finally, a North Region Subcommittee meeting will be scheduled, tentatively looking at potentially June 9th, because we do recognize that we're coming up against that time of the year. And then that would provide the opportunity for that stakeholder group as well to provide their insight and feedback. I'll echo the things that you've shared this evening, I'm sure. With that, if there are no additional questions, I will thank you for your time and the opportunity to share this with our community, and I look forward to coming back with more information.
Thank you. That was a lot of work.
Good work. Thank you.
Great, now we move on to the second item for information, which is Judy leading us through our legislative update.
I will be very fast. The revenue forecast came out today, and probably most of you have seen that it is up from what they had thought might be there. So that means now the committee, the Ways and Means Committee, starts working hard on allocating funds. And one of the first ones they usually address is the state school fund. And so I put in front of you, Kirthi and I just finished a letter that we will be submitting on behalf of our district. Most districts are talking about what not getting a full funding of the state school fund would mean. So I apologize to the public. I will get it to Debbie and you can upload it, and then we will be sending it to our local representatives. And the only other thing I want to note is, that you all know from the news, the Senate Republicans and Independents have not returned. And so what that means is the Senate is basically shut down. So any bills that didn't come out of the Senate or have to go over to the Senate are virtually dead. And so the only bills that they're working on are on the House side. And there's about 3 education bills that might make it through. One is the abbreviated day, one that we've heard about over time, Senate Bill 819. There's another one with some rules adjustments and the early literacy bill might make it out with some funding. House Bill 3198, that will create grants that schools can apply for to help with their early literacy coaching instruction. So that's really about the size of it. And so we will hopefully, if we can't get if there isn't a majority for allocations, the legislature is constitutionally required to pass a budget by June 30th. This happened once, I remember when I was aware in 2003, they immediately closed the session and called a special session. So I don't know what will happen. I hope they come back for allocation.
Does anybody have questions for Judy? Okay, I would like us to take a very quick break.
Okay.
6 minutes, 5 minutes, let's do 6, my favorite number.
Okay,
So it's 8:57, let's pretend it's 8:58 and come back at 9:04. The next item on our agenda are items for action. We'll start with the first one as listed on the agenda, which is to consider approval of downtown urban renewal plan amendment. We heard about this at our last meeting, and we did receive information based on the questions. Would someone like to make a motion? Alicia, you're on the roll.
Yeah, I move that we approve the downtown urban renewal plan amendment.
Is there a second? Okay, I'll do Judy, because I caught you first. So Alicia Hayes moves to approve the downtown urban renewal plan amendment, and Judy Newman seconds it.
Can I quickly clarify? I think the board needs to concur with the plan amendment. That's the state specific language. So concur with the plan amendment with an increase to maximum indebtedness of $50 million.
Nope, I want to do it my way. All right, do that?
Yes.
Should I talk?
Go for it.
Are you there for me? Where's my person?
Yeah.
All right. I move that
Here, you know what? I have it pasted. Give me 1 second. I'm gonna paste it in the chat. Everyone.
The chat, because we can't use the chat.
Oh, we can't use the chat. Okay.
It's not.
It will be public record because you'll be saying exactly what's in the chat.
Okay, then.
I thought we could never use it.
Well, it's because if we don't articulate.
Run with it, put it in the chat.
Okay, perfect.
Don't put any big words that I can't pronounce.
Too late.
Oh, no. Okay, if not, Judy, you're gonna have to do it. I move that the board concur with the city council's proposed planned amendment to increase the maximum indebtedness of the downtown urban renewal district by $50 million in accordance with ORS 457.220 and 4.7.477-7.
Okay, so I'm so glad I have this in front of me. Alicia Hayes moves to concur with the Eugene City Council's proposed plan amendment to increase maximum indebtedness for the downtown urban renewal district by $50 million in accordance with ORS 457.220 and 457.4707, and seconded by Judy Newton. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes unanimously with yes votes from Judy Newman, Alicia Hayes, Myra Bassett, Gordon Laper, and Michelle Shu. Thank you so much, Amanda, for joining us and helping us with that motion.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for your time.
For answering our questions too. You guys did a wonderful job. All right, next up, we have to hear about the one pass. I do have the information in front of me. If we have any questions, I know Jenna is prepared to answer them, but I'll walk you guys through. I think everyone here is familiar with the one pass. Yeah, Gordon, you're familiar with the one pass? Okay, so we have the opportunity to authorize the expenditure for 4,000 one pass summer activity passes for Eugene 4J students who are served by the free reduced meal program and are part of the CO learning program, CO summer learning. I can go into more details, but if you would like to know the cost would be $240,000 total cost, which would be paid utilizing one-time funding through ESSER federal funding. This is being recommended by the superintendent to approve. If you'd like me to give you some background, I could just say that this would be a return to participating
at a level that is comparable to Springfield, if I'm not mistaken. And leaves also some passes available to that goal. So, would somebody like to make a motion?
I feel like I've been hogging the motion, so.
All right, does somebody else? Judy, go for it.
I move that we approve purchasing 4,001 passes for the summer.
So you want to second that? Okay, so Judy moves to approve purchasing 4,001 passes for this summer. And I'm wording it exactly, I want to make sure that we're covering all our bases though, but seconded by Michelle. Is there any discussion? The only thing I'll add is just to emphasize that this motion would mean that these are being distributed free of cost to students who are in the Family Meals Program and the SEAL Summer Learning Program. All right, no discussion, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Awesome, this passes unanimously with 5 aye votes from Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, Courtney Lafer, Alicia Hayes, and myself, Maya Rabasa. Next up, we have to approve the method by which we will conduct our board self-evaluation. I would like to propose, and I'm not making a motion, but the proposal is that we conduct our self-evaluation using a survey that will be built off of the survey OSBA has developed.
I would have made that motion.
What's that?
I said I would have made that motion.
There you go, so just repeat it.
I move that this board do their self-assessment by using a tool, what did you say?
Survey.
A survey tool, I'll just use both, that is, would you say in accordance with, I'm sorry,
Built off of.
built off of, okay, I'm gonna start again. I move that this board do a self-assessment using a survey built off of the one that OSBA recommends as developed. Okay, well, that's close.
Does anybody want to second that motion? Judy, okay, so Alicia Hayes moves that we do a self-evaluation of the board using a survey tool built off of the survey that OSBA has developed. And Judy Newman seconds that. Is there any discussion? In that case, all those in favor, raise your hand and say aye.
Aye.
Aye. It passes unanimously with aye votes from Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, Gordon Lafer, Alicia Hayes, and myself, Maya Rabasa. Thank you, Jenna, for helping us with that. Next up, as an item for action, is coming to a decision on the complaints we discussed in our work session, as well as one of the complaints from our previous work session. Are there any? We'll have to do those in 3 separate motions. Does anybody have a motion for any of those complaints? Michelle?
For the previous session.
Okay.
You get the dates when you do it.
That was May 10th, our discussion on May 10th.
Are you wanting the date of the complaint?
Yeah, sorry,
Maybe
just so I know which I've done here.
March 13th.
Thank you. What was it? March 13th.
So, regarding the March 13th complaint, I move to hold a hearing with the option for the respondent to participate through a written statement or a virtual statement
That's all right, I'll have to repeat it then.
For my cousin.
So.
I move. Go ahead.
Then, well, I have to repeat it anyway, so.
Go ahead.
Let me see if I got it. Michelle Shu moves to hold a hearing for the March 13th complaint with the respondent having the opportunity to participate with a written statement or virtually. Is there a second? Gordon Lafer seconds that motion. Is there discussion? Michelle, go ahead.
In the complaint, there is a request for a hearing. And I would feel that if it's specified in the complaint, that we should honor.
Are there any other questions or comments? Well, at the risk of repeating myself from last time, I'm gonna reemphasize that it feels really important to me that we don't let this go unresolved. And that this gives us an opportunity to really dig into one of our policies. We all expressed a lot of questions that could not only inform a decision, a hearing could not only inform a decision around this complaint, but could also inform ways in which we might find ourselves wanting to change some of our policies. I think it would be really detrimental to our staff morale to not take action on this in a way that doesn't leave it just hanging. Judy, you look like you're ready to comment. Your hands are dancing.
I do want to make a comment. I don't know that having a hearing, I think we already know we need to dig into some of our policies to clarify what we really need to do and what. I think we all agree to that. And that it feels like going into a hearing with ambiguous policies that we haven't changed. I think we already know where the issues are, so I don't know what would be gained, honestly, from a hearing. That's my feeling about it.
Could you just give a little bit more, what do you mean, which policies are ambiguous?
Just how we're gonna enforce our policies, how board conduct. It seems like this affects how our policies about using social media and our past practice and what the policies say and what we have to do to agree to and what would be the consequence if board members don't follow it.
Does anybody else have anything else to add? Gordon and then Michelle.
I guess I just think, there are a number of other complaints where I think that we agree that investigation was warranted and the policies we're dealing with are the same as those. So I agree it would be good to clarify policies in the future, but I don't see any reason to not, for that to be a reason to not hold a hearing on something where a complainant has requested a hearing. In the other ones, we're doing investigation. There's no more uncertainty here than there is there. So I think it is doing right by the person who, by the whole issue, to hold a complaint, and we're going to have to decide whatever we decide, just like we will in any other complaint. Thanks.
Michelle?
Yeah, I feel like not holding a hearing when it's requested is dismissive. it's been specifically requested. And this person deserves to communicate with us in the way that they choose.
The only thing that the thing that I will add is, we talked a lot about the policy and, it's a pretty clear statement to me that it means social media. I know for you, Judy, you're, having some questions about what happens in a private space. I do think, and I looked at this over the break between work session, it does specifically say that the board member took the conversation outside of the group and talked about it not only in our board meeting, but also on their Facebook page. So it did go outside of the space of the group. Alicia?
I think this board and the future board need to address this. They need to be very clear. And we need to, I believe, stop taking this kind of conversation to Facebook, or I'll just embarrass myself right from here with their names, so I'm not going to. And I understand that some of my colleagues on this board feel that the way to go about addressing that is through a hearing, and some feel it's very important because that's what was requested. I cannot agree with that because we get requests. I don't want to argue, I'm just saying, for me, we get requests for things that we haven't gone to hearing on. I know I've had complaints filed against me that didn't go to a hearing or and they may have been asked for, I'm not sure. So I think I want to be respectful of this person's feelings and what they have experienced, but I don't think a hearing moves us forward. And that's my opinion. And I respect that you have your opinion and you have a path forward and you see that path. That's not the path that I see. I see that doesn't get resolution. It gives people time to talk and kind of continue what happened on social media. As I see it, it may not happen. And so I want that addressed, but I see it being addressed in a different way. As a board, this board or the next board, I like this board because I'd like it to stop now. Could deal with that. That's not what's on the table, so I'm not going to talk about that. But, I just want you to know, I agree, we need to curtail this, we need to raise the bar on our expectations of how we treat you.
So just to clarify, have there been examples of somebody explicitly asking for a hearing and we denied it?
I'm not sure about hearing why, but there are things people ask for and we don't do it. So just because someone's asked for it doesn't mean that I probably could tell you what the folks I talked to at break wanted. We didn't do it. I know that's a little out there, but you know what I'm saying? That's one avenue. That's not the avenue I believe will move us forward this board.
Courtney?
Thank you. I just have a procedural question. I think this is a really important issue. I've already said what I think is right, but it seems like if we need 4 votes to make a decision about how to move forward on anything, and I guess my question is if that's true, and if there are not 4 votes, might it make sense to defer this to a next meeting in hopes that we have more complete attendance on the board?
So I think, Gordon, then what you need to do is to amend the original motion to be tabled until we have attendance that would lead us to make a decision that.
Okay,
that has to take the person who made the motion has to take that amendment.
So I would propose to Michelle, who I think made the original motion of friendly amendment, which is that we table this until we have more full attendance on the board and are able to actually make a majority decision about how to handle this issue, this complaint.
I accept the amendment.
Question on the amendment?
Yeah, now we have discussion about the amendment, so Gordon, you can speak first, but if not, Alicia's eager.
No, I just had a question.
Or, well, discussion includes questions.
Okay.
So my,
I don't need to say anything else.
So I'm assuming, so when you say full participation, we'll wait for Laurel to be back. Oh, right. No, Laurel.
Ideally, yes, or at least that we have 4 people. I mean, if my understanding is correct, that it takes 4 people to decide to take any action on this complaint. And if
yeah, we do have a quorum, Gordon, but, and we have no idea when or if Laurel plans to ever return. We don't have very
I'm
much.
sorry, okay, if I'm wrong about the procedural thing, you could tell me and I'll drop it, but I thought that it seemed from the discussion that there was not agreement of 4 members of the board, and I thought that's what was required to decide one way or the other. So I would defer this until the next meeting in hopes that we have
If we don't have a quorum voting in favor of the motion, then the motion dies.
right, but then we'd need a different motion. We'd need to be able to have a quorum voting in favor of some other motion, or else we can't do anything with the
So then
complaint.
we need to make another motion, and it sounds like people are committed to coming to a conclusion that addresses this, and that conclusion would not be taking no action, I assume, I don't know. So, are there more comments or questions regarding the amended motion? In that case, I'm not seeing anybody speaking up. All those in favor of tabling the original motion until full participation can be had by the board, raise your hand and say aye.
Sorry, I just wanted to be clear that my proposal was until we have more participation. It's not a requirement for full, but and even if we had 1 more member, if that gave us 4 votes in one direction, just so that we could act on it. And if I'm wrong about the procedure, I'll just shut up and we can move on.
Yeah, I think that you might be wrong about the procedure there.
Okay, thanks.
So then do you withdraw your amendment? Or we can just take it to a vote?
I will follow the wisdom of the chair on this.
I think that the motion is, I think the amendment to the motion is likely to fail because of the number of people in attendance. And I don't see it getting a quorum, but I'm not gonna put it to vote.
The amendment?
I'm happy to withdraw it then, if that's what makes sense.
Okay, so then Gordon withdraws that amendment and we return to the original motion, which is to hold a hearing with the respondent having the opportunity to participate with a written statement or a virtual attendance. Judy?
I just have a question for people for whoever made that motion. How would a hearing help resolve the issue? I mean, how do you see this moving the situation ahead? Are you hoping to learn more information? Or I'm just trying I'm really trying to see what the purpose of the hearing would be from your perspective.
I would like to hear more information. I would like to hear what the complainant has to say.
Can I answer that also, even though I'm not? Please. I would like to hear more specifically because there were implications of impact on one's job being evaluated inappropriately. And I don't know if that is me reading into it, but I would like to hear from them if that is part of the concern that they have. And I'm happy to point to where it talks about that. It's on the second page, the second to last paragraph. And you know, I'm trying to understand more. I think the point of the hearing, I think the point of the hearing anytime is for more information. So it says that somebody is, board member is not only disrespecting the employee, but also evaluating them in a public setting. A, we don't evaluate employees, and B, evaluations for contracts, if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty darn confident are not done in public. So that's why I would like clarification on that particular component of this. That's the part that leaves me the most concerned and the most desirous of what we should describe, which is finding a way to resolve and deter this behavior.
Yes, I'm hearing, I can hear that. So do you think hearing is the best way to get that, or would that be an investigation to find out really if someone was evaluated? That's an act, you know, that would be someone, I don't know. I don't know what I would get from a hearing.
Well, I think that that both are avenues to get that information. One just also happens to be what was formally requested of us. Looking to see if they it says specifically a hearing. And I definitely do not want to hand this off to our new board. Are there any other questions or comments? I think we've all spoken to Grace, maybe not you, Alicia, but so we're gonna continue to talk, yeah, also approved by framework. Okay. And all those in favor of holding a hearing regarding the March 13th complaint, with the respondent having the opportunity to participate with a written statement or virtually, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. All right, well, the motion dies with 3 ayes and 2 nays. Ayes from Gordon Lafer, Michelle Shu, and Maya Rabasa, and nays from Judy Newman and Alicia Hayes. Are there any other motions to make? If there are no other motions to be made, then this complaint is going to sit in the land of the board takes no action. I'd like us to hear Alicia's words, and Alicia, I don't know if you have an idea of how we use this complaint to
Well,
not be,
At the end of the meeting, I'm gonna make a suggestion to the board. Or when we take 3 votes and.
you won't be told to do it now as a motion?
We have to do a motion. I get 3 votes and 2. Trust me. I have to think about it.
Okay, so as it stands, I don't believe that we can renew the motion I made last time to issue a statement of censure because there's no new information regarding that. Ready?
I guess maybe I've missed something. I understand that there was not a majority tonight to have a hearing, but does that mean then that I guess if the default of what that means is that the complaint is functionally dismissed, I think that would be a terrible mistake. And I'm not sure, I guess if that's the case, I would like to move that we hold this over for reconsideration at the next meeting, not necessarily for a hearing, but for what is the right way forward, as opposed to effectively dismissing the complaint because there's not a majority to decide to do one thing or another with it tonight.
So are you making a motion to table action on the complaint?
Assuming that if my understanding is correct, that the alternative is to effectively dismiss it, then yes, I make a motion that we table the table action on the complaint.
Is there a second? Okay, Courtney moves to table action on the complaint until our next meeting, and Michelle Shu seconds it. Is there any discussion? Gordon?
Well, I think I'm just going to say what we all know. This is one of several instances of members of the community, including staff, forming complaints of having been publicly attacked by one board member who I believe has brought tremendous toxicity to board meetings and to the board's relationship with the public and staff during the year. This is also an employee who has a complaint about undue influence and mistreatment and retaliation on the job. And for the board to say, we're not going to do anything with this seems to me outrageous. You can just deliberate about whether investigation or hearing is the best way to get at this, but to say we're going to do nothing, I can't believe that that's really what everybody on the board wants to do. So given the fact that we're apparently not able to come to a majority agreement right now about exactly what we do want to do, I would hope that everyone on the board would agree that holding that over and trying to figure out some way we could do is preferable than saying we're going to dismiss this complaint. Thank you.
Michelle?
We've had discussions in the past about the validity of complaints, as we've had many barrage of complaints this year, and to dismiss a valid complaint doesn't feel right.
Judy, you look like you dancing next to the microphone.
I have to think about what holding it over would do. I appreciate that people want to take action, fellow board members do, and I'd like to figure out, I think this is just one of several complaints, or many, that we've had like this, and I'm not sure what an effective action we could do, and that's what I want to have the conversation about, what it is. What are what can we do to remedy this? And I don't want a staff person to be hurt. I don't want any community member to be hurt. by the actions of this board. It feels bigger than this one complaint. And I guess I go back to the drawing board to see what it is, what are the resolutions? Would an investigation shed more light on what's going on and give us more guidance? I don't know that a hearing would, in my mind, and I don't know, I guess, is the other option we can say there are valid concerns in here and that's it, there's no action to take? I don't really know what we're going back to decide.
I just wanna emphasize that, the action that's being requested is to find out more information, it's not to come to a conclusion. So the motion to have a hearing did not pass, but the motion was to get more information, and we're stopping that process by not passing that. So I can appreciate that you don't want a staff member or staff in general, because everybody's watching, to be heard, but it's gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt, and we talked about, you talked about how there's been a lot of complaints like this, and and Michelle's saying they're not the same, and I have to say, I see the similarities, and I see the difference also, and we have one employee, and that's our superintendent, but we also have an expectation to work towards making this a place where people want to be employees. We don't want to set up our superintendent the situation where people think that this is a hostile place to work, or where this is not a welcoming place, or where this is not a supportive place. And we have somebody asking to be able to give more information, and we're saying no. So I think that tabling it gives us more time, Judy, to answer the questions that you're asking yourself, which is what would even a resolution be? If we can't even decide right now what a resolution would be, how can we decide to cut it off completely? In a way that, like Michelle said, is it's not a dismissal of the complaint, but it's almost a little bit more painful than that, because it's saying we're not willing to give it the time. Gordon?
Well, I guess I wanted to say what you said in response to your question, Judy, which is all of those questions are things that we can, I think there's a variety of answers to, and those answers will come out if we address it, or those answers can be figured out if we address it. They can't be figured out if we vote now to effectively dismiss it. And, like, we're all adults. I don't want to pretend to not know the things that we all know. Board member O'Rourke has has leveled accusations against every member of this board, previous boards, both superintendents, members of the community, multiple staff. This is a staff member who's filed a complaint about a hostile work environment and inappropriate public treatment in violation of our policies. And for the board to sweep that under the rug and to just try to hide that because some people don't want to have either a hearing or an investigation to have it come to light, I think is unconscionable. We can decide what we want to do, but to take this and say, we just want to make it go away and pretend it didn't happen and not ever give it the light of day seems like a mistake to me.
Are you calling a point of order? Usually you've done that.
That's not true. Gordon's done it.
No, I mean the chair. You've done it as a chair.
Sure, but it's not usually me, because there's been times when I don't see what you're saying.
Okay.
So if you want.
You've done it before, so I just thought that was better.
Right.
I apologize if it's not.
We had a very memorable meeting where Laura called point of order quite a few times.
What? You think I was going to? No.
I'm just
trying my.
It hasn't always been me.
Okay,
It's been me.
fine, it's fine.
Alicia, no, it's not for me, respond. I get to do that. I did not call something because I didn't necessarily hear what you heard, which is why I'm asking you, are you calling a point of order? Because then I would like to hear what the point of order is.
Yeah, good job. Sorry, Maya, I didn't mean to cut you off.
It's okay, I just don't want to call something that I don't
Not what I was supposed to call.
That's why I was playing like if you would, yeah, okay. So I apologize, I assumed you were the one, because that's how it's been in the past, but you're right, I could do it as well.
Of
And
course.
if, it's just, it's new.
I don't know what I'm calling because I didn't.
I appreciate it. So I would just say Gordon attributed, and I just wanna sweep it under the rug, and attributed some, thoughts to Judy and I just wanted to call and say that that isn't true. I don't wanna sweep it under the rug. So it was just, in the past, we had said as a board, we weren't gonna attribute intent, and that's just what I wanted. That I didn't appreciate that being the intent. I understand this is, I go on.
You can, but can I?
No, never mind, that was a point of order.
I appreciate your point of order and it is well taken. I can understand.
That one 2 times?
Oh, because you were talking about something else. I can understand why you would make that point of order and I appreciate you making it because I didn't hear those words that way. And I can't call something that I didn't hear.
And you're right, we should do it ourselves.
It's well taken.
Maya?
Yes.
I just, that's, I can't play the tape back, but I agree. I don't mean to imply or intent on behalf of anybody on the board. I think the effect of what we would be doing would be sweeping something under the rug, but I don't mean to imply bad intent on anybody's part. So I apologize if that's how it came out.
So what you're saying is intent and impact were matching, perhaps. Alicia, you seem like you have more to say. I don't wanna force you to say more, but I think this one's Gordon, this one's a really big one.
So let me try to think if I want to do it as a motion.
Well, you can't do it as a motion.
We have a motion.
Unless you're gonna amend his motion.
Sorry, I forgot we had a motion, I was all caught up.
We do have a motion,
Point
the
of
motion
order.
is to table it until
Thank
next
you.
meeting.
I know.
Michelle,
I think that not tabling it would be impactful on the complainant in a negative way, regardless of intention. And not only on the complainant, but what she represents and all of her colleagues, everyone she works with. It will, I believe that it will be impactful in a negative way.
I do agree also. I think that intent was not aligned with the impact. The impact makes me very concerned. Are there any other questions or comments before we take this to a vote? Alicia? Anything else? All right, all those in favor of tabling action on this complaint until our next meeting, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no, nay. Is that a nay, Alicia?
Yes, nay.
The motion passes with 4 ayes and 1 nay, with aye votes from Myron Bassa, Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, and Gordon Leifer, and a nay vote from Alicia Hayes. So this is tabled until our next meeting.
So I think given that
I would like to make a motion, vote the whole thing. So I'll do it again.
Okay. Somebody wanna make, a motion, that's not what, that was a little slur, a little slip. Would somebody like to make a motion regarding one of the other two complaints? To remind you, one of them came in on March 7th and really needs our attention. The other came in May, I think May 7th, off the top of my head. Excuse me, yes, April 6th. So you make March 7th or April 6th, any motions? Not here now. Michelle?
I move to dismiss the complaint on March 7th.
Michelle Shu moves to dismiss the complaint for March 7th. Is there a second? Gordon, so moved by Michelle and seconded by Gordon Leeper. Is there discussion regarding the motion to dismiss the complaint from March 7th? Anyone? No. All right. Nobody has anything to say? In that case, all those in favor of dismissing the complaint from March 7th, raise your hand and say aye. Aye. All those opposed, raise your hand and say nay. That passes unanimously. The aye votes from Myra Bassa, Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, Gordon Laker, and Alicia Hayes. The complaint from March 7th is dismissed. Somebody like to make a motion regarding the complaint from April 6th? Michelle?
I move to dismiss the complaint on April 6th.
Michelle Shu moves to dismiss the complaint from April 6th. Is there a second? A second. Michelle Shu moves to dismiss the complaint from April 6th, and Alicia Hayes seconds that motion. Is there discussion? In that case, all those in favor of dismissing the complaint from April 6th, raise your hand and say aye. All those opposed to dismissing the complaint from April 6th, raise your hand and say aye. Alicia, I don't think I caught you.
I did, is it that?
To dismissing.
Yeah, sorry, I just did it quickly.
So we have a motion that has passed with 4 ayes and 1 nay, with aye votes from Myra Bassa, Judy Newman, Michelle Shu, and Alicia Hayes, and a nay vote from Gordon Laker. The complaint from April 6th is dismissed. Okay.
That note, I believe that is all we have for items for action. We're all done, no, I'm just kidding. Items for action at a future meeting.
You almost won more.
We have 7 items for action at a future, well, yeah, we have 6 items for action at a future meeting. The first one is to approve proposed board policy IIAA, request for reconsideration of curriculum, instruction and library materials. Rob is here to answer questions and lead us through this.
Right, good news is it won't take 20 minutes, like it says on your agenda, I don't think. So at the last time we discussed this, the request was to take an AR and make it into a policy. So we have 3 options before you in the packet. The first is the AR, so that could be a policy. The second option is a sample policy from OSBA on this topic. Because the request we got from the board was, can we simplify, take out the details, and then make an AR? And so that's option 2. And then option 3 is a version of that that has more of the Eugene flavor. So we kind of improve the OSBA sample. So we would recommend that we go with proposed version 2, and then we would develop an AR to outline the process.
Would somebody like to ask any questions? Judy?
I just had some questions. I spent a while studying these to really understand. So I think we have 1 policy and then we'll end up with 2 ARs. I mean, because this policy also covers our curriculum adoption, and we have an AR for that, and we have an AR that with the forms that we talked about.
We would end up with 2 policies and 2 ARs. Because what we're doing is we're taking out the materials reconsideration that was part of that other AR, that really long AR, and we're making 2 ARs, 2 policies. So we have a separate policy for adoption and a separate policy for reconsidering curriculum materials.
Okay.
That's what's on the table.
So I see the instructional materials AR, which is, I got that one. And so what's the policy that goes with it?
The policy would either be, well, you have 3 choices. You either make this AR into a policy, right? And the request was, well, that's too detailed for a policy, but some policies are detailed. There's nothing that prevents a board from making a super detailed policy. So that this becomes a policy. The second choice is to have a simplified policy that looks more like policy, sounds more like policy, and then we build an AR similar to this, maybe even this.
I got that.
Yeah.
So I got that it says version 2 is the Eugene shortened version that I asked for, which you did.
Yep.
And we have the AR already that we already passed, that goes with that, with the more details.
Yes.
Okay.
So what it would look like is we would start with version 2 with this attached to the AR.
Got it.
But we're not asking you to vote on the AR because we'll develop that.
I know. Here's my question. I do have the instructional materials selection one, which is now IIAAR. But I do not see a policy that goes with it at this point.
Okay, and the reason for that is what we were asked to do is to take this AR and can we vote it and make it a policy?
Right.
So it's
gonna cover both is my question. It's gonna have 2 ARs, one about curriculum adoption and one about instructional materials, because we have 2 ARs right now. And this one's very detailed about how we, that we do curriculum adoption. And right now, it is the IIAAR. So,
Okay, I might need some help here, but I'll
Okay.
try again. Okay, so we
Give me
had
a-
one really big AR that was attached to the adoption. And then the request was, we want to create a separate policy.
and you did that.
And
I
we
see
did that.
here, yeah. And that's good. So we have a policy and an AR.
No, that AR, if I
Hmm?
may, that AR would be the policy. It would not then have an
So
AR.
we would get rid of this.
Yes.
We wouldn't have
I
those.
wouldn't wanna do that. This is the curriculum process, curriculum adoption process.
No, we have a curriculum adoption process, and we're not even discussing that. That's a separate policy and AR.
So what number is that? Because I'm looking at the same number for that.
This is the policy to challenge curriculum.
Yeah, no, I know which one we're talking about, the numbers are the same, so that's why I'm confused. And I was looking at a policy, so all I wanna know is what policy that attaches to, and that's fine. Right now, they're all labeled IIA.
This is labeled IIAA.
Okay, so it's not then in the okay.
It's a brand new policy.
Brand new, all over, and so it will now be on the policies on the website. That there'll be an IIAA.
Yeah, there'd be two, IIA, IIAA.
Okay. All right, you got it? I did, I couldn't find my, that's okay, I'll look.
Gordon?
Thank you. I'm a little confused here, as maybe I'm missing something in the packet. What I see is OSBA policy, the OSBA sample policy, and then proposed version 1 of the reconsideration policy, which looks to me like basically what has come out of recommendations from librarians and educators and what we've looked at before and have been talking about in previous meetings, with the process spelled out, and then a proposed version number 2, also about reconsideration of materials, which is shorter and does not have the same process spelled out. Am I looking at the right things?
Yes.
So then we've adopted an AR, which is very close to proposed version number 1. Is that right?
That's correct.
So when you said we adopt a policy and then you would write the AR, does that mean depending on which policy we adopt, the AR might change from what it now is?
No, if you make the AR, the old AR a policy, then we wouldn't need an AR because it's very detailed. It explains what to do.
Okay.
That
so
was your original request, Gordon, when you said, hey, let's make a policy.
I remember that. So that's version number 1.
That's that's version 1. And then when it got discussed by the board, there was a request, this is too detailed. It doesn't look like a policy, it looks like an AR. Can we simplify it? And so then we created a simplified version.
If we had version number 2, then would the AR be changed to somehow reflect that?
Yeah, then we would take this version 1 and it would become the AR to go with version 2.
In other words, what is currently the AR would stay the AR. It would just have a kind of more shorter general language policy.
Correct.
Okay. Well, I guess it doesn't matter if my memory is right or wrong. My memory was that there was a request like to not have the forms included or something, but I personally would support version 1 because I think it's important that we're very clear about what the steps are. We're living in a time of obviously of increased censorship around the country, increased political organizing to try to ban anti-racist texts and queer inclusive texts and all kinds of stuff. And I think we've come up with the help of of a lot of staff work, a very strong policy, and I wouldn't want to water that down. I understand the thinking behind version number 2, but it feels like it doesn't have enough teeth and isn't clear enough to me. That's just my personal take on it. Thank you.
Michelle and then Judy.
I don't really see what you mean by it doesn't look like a policy if it is very detailed. I understand that some of the policies are very short and succinct, but this particular policy would strengthen attacks against reconsideration of materials that are unfounded. And we are already seeing across the nation libraries being threatened and materials being threatened, book bans as Gordon had said, and I trust the professionals in our district who advised the language in this policy for proposal number 1.
Okay, and just to be clear, we're not voting or anything tonight, we're just discussing. I appreciate that, just be clear for the audience.
So because this is a current AR. Go ahead.
I requested that we take out that some of the specificity, Gordon, and you did a really good, I think version 2 accomplished it. I don't want to make it any weaker. What I didn't want to do is put in policy an exact form and an exact manual. And I think the way you did this, Rob, was say the superintendent will make sure there's a robust administrative regulation, step-by-step process. He spells out what is in the AR. So we've already adopted the AR, it's great, it's strong. And the policy then, it just gives an ability, it's so prescriptive that I think maybe there'll be a better form or a better manual. So I think it doesn't get it off the hook, it just makes it a policy, a better, bigger picture policy with the AR. That's why I suggested it.
Are there any more questions for Rob while we have it? Gordon?
I have one other question, which is in the version 2, the version 2 under, I don't know, where we start having the numbered clauses says, the final decision of controversial reading matter rests with the board. Is that sounds different to me than in version 1, where I thought these decisions were being made by a committee that included trained librarians and educators, and I mean, maybe the board is the ultimate decision maker on everything, but I would rather, if there's a way for us to depoliticize this and have it be handled in a professional matter and not a political matter, that would be better. So is that a difference between version 1 and version 2?
Yeah, that's probably something that we would want to talk about perhaps and make a revision on that.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions or comments? This will come back to us next meeting for a vote. Thank you, Ron. Next up is to consider calendar dates for 2023-2024 school year. You guys have this in your agenda packet. You'll notice that the calendar is strictly the traditional first and third Wednesday of the month, except for the Wednesday in Wednesday in October, so it changed to the second Wednesday of October due to Yom Kippur. Are there any questions? Same with Wednesday in December. I think that's good. So
So it's a pretty standard calendar.
Unless we're looking at something different, you'll notice that this proposal indicates that on months where there are 2 board meetings, one is a regular board meeting, the other is a work or executive session. So that there would be 1 regular board meeting a month, and the second meeting every month would be dedicated as a work session or an executive session. Another work session could be added to the regular board meeting schedule that month if need be. So I just want to call out that as good.
I'm so glad you did, because I absolutely glossed right over that.
So,
Lisa?
I was going to point that out, yeah, I noticed that. But here's the other thing, you do not have enough meetings, I think you should go every Wednesday next year. Everybody's okay with that.
Point of order.
Seeing it as our board meetings, going every other week are so long, I do want to think deeply about moving to a completely different model.
What was the rationale?
Well, it's a proposal. The idea is to dedicate time for work so that does not happen in the middle of a board meeting, which is a business meeting, and exercise some discipline so we focus exclusively on board business during a regular board meeting.
I wonder, I wonder if that will impact that discipline desire.
As is the case with the high school schedule, I don't think the schedule alone will be the exercise of discipline.
I agree, I think it's coming to a place of willingness to focus on business. More than how often the meetings are, but Judy?
You just did a phone number.
I thought we, oh no, I was gonna see what time it was.
I have something that it's not on here, but I would like to hear feedback from the board on. I think, regardless of who's in leadership, I would strongly encourage us to put at least the fall retreat on the calendar right now, so that people know they can plan ahead, and we don't find ourselves putting 65 options on a doodle poll and 0 being approved.
So you're asking us to propose some retreat dates when we bring this back as an item for action?
I wanted to hear what the rest of the board thought about that idea, but if it were up to me and I had my brothers, I'd rather know now what the retreat days are before. Judy?
I think that's a great idea. And I'd also put some mid-year ones on, just to hold, because we typically done a mid-year check-in for goals or whatever. I don't know what's called, spring retreat.
It's like August and March, so.
Yeah. And in terms of the schedule, I mean, I think it's really ambitious. I really like the idea. I'm certainly willing to give it a try. We can't get our work done, and maybe, it's totally our issue. So I don't know, it would be great. I know other boards meet less frequently, but they're usually smaller districts, so.
Could we, I'm thinking about, like, tonight we had to make a decision on the one pass. Could we consider wording the second meeting of the month, work or executive session, unless a regular board meeting is necessary? Does that work for creating a calendar that the community knows what to expect?
I think we can schedule special board meetings if needed, we just have to notice them. And so in any any scenario, the board could, with proper notice, schedule a board meeting.
And the same is true for a work or executive session.
Correct. If we wanted to add a work session to a regular board meeting or an executive session to a regular board meeting, it would just be a decision that would go to board leadership in preparation for a meeting.
Judy?
Just one other thought to consider is it does reduce our public comment quite a bit. And we have a community that likes to comment. I mean, we're basically saying we'll take public comment once a month, so we might consider taking more than 10, I don't know. It's a concern.
Good point, thank you for raising it. Anyone else have questions or comments? Yeah, we don't vote on this today. Is there anything else that we would add to that statement?
No. Thank you.
Thank you for checking things up and making us think deeply about our practices and not just doing things because we always do it that way. I think this is important to consider regardless of what the decision ends up being, especially as the intention is laid out. All right, the next item for action at a future meeting is to look at revisions to board policy IK. That's academic achievement. This is a first read.
Yes, this is a required change because the law changed regarding graduation. And on demonstration of essential skills is no longer a graduation requirement. So this policy reflects that change.
Are there any questions? If it's a required change, we're probably left with fewer questions. No, I see no questions. All right, the next item, Rob, just make yourself comfortable for the next VLC, are revisions to, approve deleting board policy IGBBC, talented and gifted program and services.
Yeah, we have multiple, kind of combine all of these items. They're all in regards to legal changes to the talented and gifted program. So this is all recommendations from law and OSBA. Regarding identification of tag students and the development of the tag plan. And we have a up-to-date tag plan on our website that's very detailed on how this process works. It's the good work of our talented and gifted Jocelyn Mendelson. So all of these policies reflect that.
So they were developed by OSBA to reflect the legal requirements, is that right?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Yeah, if you look at, I don't know if you have the colored versions in front of you, but if you look at all of the conditions of a lot of details around, there used to be the previous rules around identification are 97 percentile test scores, things like that, very black and white cutoffs, and now the law has shifted to make it more inclusive, other ways to identify students, talented in programs.
Do we have any questions? Are we good to go?
Again, this is a first read, so.
All right, well, thank you so much. I think we're good. Last on our agenda are suggestions by the board for consideration of items in a future meeting. Are there items the board has to suggest for adding to future meeting agendas?
I'm just waiting to hear my name.
Please, I didn't know that was you asked.
Oh, sorry. Alright, so we did have quite a conversation about the complaints and about our policy and I was really clear that I think we need to write this right away. I think it's I don't know that everybody would agree that it's been confusing, but I remember just last year, Gordon shared in depth First Amendment right. I think he read it and talked about the First Amendment right to have an opinion. And that's confusing when we have a policy that talks about our behavior online and in public. So what I would ask this, and it's not just one complaint, so I appreciate that we talked about one complaint. As Gordon said as well, there are numerous issues that have come up. So what I would like for us to do at the next meeting is that we as a board look at the policy, get clarity, and maybe not everybody needs clarity on the policy. Get clarity on the policy, get clarity how it supersedes, I don't want to say supersedes, and you guys can argue with my words, try to hit my intent. How when we sign on to this board, we sign on to that policy. And then I think as a board, we should have a discussion about if that seems to be violated and we bring that forward, somebody brings it forward, that we do a hearing, but maybe we don't do a hearing with the aggrieved party, but we do it as a board. Again, these are just ideas, maybe I'm going too into detail, but I want you to get the concept so that everybody understands what the policy is and what the repercussions are, because we have to have clarity on that and clarity for not only the board, but our staff and our community, what our expectations are of each other at this board. And I think it's a big ask, but I think we should do it at our next meeting, or at least start it, and let's right this situation. So that was my intent of, I appreciate the concept of a hearing, I appreciate the concept of tabling it, but I think we can do something in 2 weeks. Maybe I'm wrong, but I'm just looking for 2 votes to put that on the agenda. I would look to leadership to put it on the agenda, look to staff to help. Maybe it's too big, I don't know. That's what I thought. I need 2 people to approve.
Gordon Jr. and Grace to agree.
You don't want to deal with it?
I would like to, can I say why I'm not raising my hand?
You're the boss. I mean, you're the chair.
I would like to do that. I think that at this time of year, we're already asking to get on ACC and do that, and that feels really pressing to me. And I just worry about, and I put this over to the superintendent to consider. This feels like another big one. It also feels like one that might better be served with this next board coming on. A board that's not emotionally triggered by this.
It's fine if you want to wait.
No, I'm not saying that.
I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off.
I'm just saying why I'm hesitant to support immediately adding it, A, for the work burden, because I would really like to work on ACC, and B, because this feels like the kind of policy that is also very reminiscent of working agreements. And in the sense of, we don't have to have something on here about board members treating and referring to other board members, staff, students, and the public with respect. And I just, again, I think that it might be a really good place to jump in with the new board. Judy?
I appreciate that, Maya, a lot, and I appreciate both the urgency and the desire to take the time and do this with the new board. This is my problem. We have dealt with so many complaints, and one of the problems that we're having is none of this is clear. And I'm going to continue to have it, and I'm not going to want to even talk about those complaints again until I understand this. It is really huge. I feel very strongly about this. We're making decisions based on allegations of racism, of I have this right and free speech, and that is all very big and heavy stuff. And I feel like we don't have basic agreements as a board. And that's beyond frustrating. That's why I feel the urgency. And so we've been doing this all year.
Right, and our board is about to be completely different people.
I know, we have more of these things to deal with before, so.
So I also just wanna hear from Dr. Dye if we've already prioritized ACC to you at this time of the year, all other things happening, including the YG work, and Kelly, is this something that we can do for 2 weeks from now?
I don't find it to be that complicated. In terms of setting up the conversation, the policy is pretty clear that students and staff and members of the community would be treated with respect. There's no condition there, like except in these circumstances, or in these places, or in certain when certain conditions are in place in private chat. It's very clear that elected members of the board will be respectful to students and staff and families and members of the community. So I don't know that the burden of the discussion is necessarily on me or staff, it's on you.
Right, but, and I agree that the policy is very clear, and on the other hand, my fellow board mate does not think that the policy is clear. So I'm concerned, I don't know exactly what we'd be doing. Judy?
I think we've raised some of the issues. During many of the complaints we've talked, people have said, where does free speech run against our policy? Where does someone really say, I absolutely agree to follow these policies on this board, and I think it sounds like it. Yes, I read this policy, it's crystal clear. I've read from the day I joined this board, but it hasn't ever played out that way. And I want to be really clear, and then what happens when someone doesn't? So follow it. If we all agree this is the way it should be on the board and everyone buys into that, but can we then censor someone, and then do they come back and say, you're censoring me on free speech? And I don't know. I don't know the answer.
So what are we asking to be prepared for us? Or are we just designating time for a conversation?
Can we just, first of all, consequences for the policy, do people have to
I would say do people have to sign? I mean, is it a tacit agreement we buy into the policies? No one ever said to me, Judy, do you buy into all these policies? We talk about changing policies all the time. All that has to be really overt, I think, in procedures.
If I don't have the 3 votes, it just dies.
Just a quick answer, in the swearing in, that's when you agree to abide by all current policies. And they're in place, and you agree to abide by them until the board takes a vote to change them. So, if that helps in any way.
Maya,
Gordon?
just in the interest of time, can we move on to a next proposal?
Yes.
Thanks. I'd like to propose that we put on the agenda for discussion. I'm not sure if it would be a resolution or policy encouraging the use of community benefits agreements in future construction. We, board members may remember, the board voted to use a community benefits agreement that guaranteed family health insurance to the construction workers who built Camas Ridge. And we did it as an experiment. It was the last school left being built under the old bond. And the experiment was essentially, could we do it without increasing cost or slowing down the timetable? And we now know that it did not increase cost or slow down the timetable. So I think it's important for us to I'm not sure exactly what form, but I'd want to put on the agenda for discussion some kind of something about encouraging that in future construction, because we have an opportunity to create more living wage jobs with family health insurance in our community, including for families of 4J students at no additional cost to taxpayers or the district. So that's my proposal, is that we put that discussion on the agenda for an upcoming meeting.
I have 2 hands to support that. So,
Can I ask a question? Is it okay to get a report back on the costs, which is what we're pursuing here? Gordon, are you saying you get a report?
Are you suggesting we get a report back on if there were any additional costs? That was, they had taken it on as a pilot to do it. I agree, we should get the feedback. So asking for the feedback about that. And then we could take action if in fact
I'm
there
sorry.
were any costs,
Or
have the discussion.
Sorry, I've already gotten the information that I personally have already gotten the information on that feedback, but I agree. I think that would be good for that to be part of, for that to happen, for a report back to the board as a whole, and then to have a discussion about what, if anything, we want to do about that.
so you're.
It's not just to get the report back.
So we get a report back on what you've already received, Gordon, so the rest of the board could be informed, and it would lead to a discussion, so it'd be an item for information. Okay, so we have hands raised for that. Just taking them. Are there any other items to be added to a future agenda? In that case, yeah. Yes.
I'd like to revisit the conversation about re-engaging the Eugene Police Department in some way, and determining whether or not the board authorizes me to come back to you with a proposal.
I thought we already had that planned for the first meeting in June.
Just wanted to confirm.
In that case, the next regular board meeting is scheduled for June 7th, 2023. And I want to remind everyone that we will also be having an executive session that evening to continue our evaluation of our superintendent. I'd like people to, like, 5 p.m. on their calendar. I think sometime 5. And if we might have to have a double executive session. Let's put 5 down. That changes, that can change. You just mark that on June 7th calendars. And we'll have an exec session followed by a regular board meeting. And this meeting is adjourned at 10:03 p.m.
When I first said